it's been pretty hectic. So is the stream going on right now?
Yeah, probably. I usually
Okay,
give it a
great.
minute just to wait for people to show up in the audience so they can tell me if the sound is
Okay,
working. So,
okay, no problem. It's pretty been hectic, that's for sure. Trying to catch up with school and all that kind of stuff, but it's pretty hectic, I must admit. And it's a new venturing into a new course altogether. So it's pretty amazing.
cool. What course are you taking? Where are you going for a degree?
I'm actually doing my degree in University of Witwatersrand. It's one of the universities in South Africa, and I'm doing my master's in medicine, specializing in vaccinology. So that's essentially what I'm doing now.
Cool.
So I was in public health, and then I shifted into medicine, and it's proving to be pretty pretty stressful and hectic, but we'll make it out. Yeah. And what are you doing? What do you do like
YouTube.
besides YouTube? Oh,
YouTube is
YouTube
my
is all you do.
full-time job. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you basically get enough time to interact with as many people as you possibly can.
Yep, pretty much.
Okay. Okay. And maybe prior to YouTube, what were you doing?
I was a video game tester at Activision.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. I actually don't know what that is, eh?
It means I
So,
played video games. I got
mm,
paid to find bugs in video games.
oh, okay. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. So essentially, maybe if let's say a company comes up with a video game or an app for a video game, they would run it by you, and then you see whether it's gonna run smoothly on whatever device or whatever the case may be.
Yeah,
That's me
sort
trying to
of.
speculate.
So normally
Okay.
the big companies would hire like an entire building full of just game testers, and so you would work in that building with a bunch of other people, and they'd give you 20 copies of the game, and you'd play it on each of the different platforms and run up against every single wall with every single character, and trying to see if you can clip through the walls and find bugs and glitches and those kinds of things. So yeah, I was hired by the big game companies to test the games. So I didn't really get a say
Okay.
in anything. I was just there to find bugs.
Oh, okay, okay. And do you still do that sometimes, or you went out of that completely?
Oh, I got out of that because that was it was like a full time job for half of the year. You'd have to work 8 to 12 hour
Oh,
days.
hectic,
Yep.
hectic. That's pretty hectic. That's pretty hectic. But I love games actually. I love what's it called? I'm mostly into the Grand Theft games.
Yep.
Though since I got my new laptop, I haven't been able to what's it called? Install Grand Theft
Yeah.
or like the latest one. So it's been a while since I played that. For now, I'm just running around with Asphalt. So I'm sure those are not the proper popular serious games that gamers are into, but those are ones that I found pretty interesting growing up. So I'm still into that vibe of let me still enjoy that childhood memory of that
Yep.
of those particular games. So yeah,
Yep. The nostalgia thing for sure.
essentially. But yeah.
So, James, we are now live, and people in the chat say sound is good. So, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Okay, so thanks for having me, Tom. I hope I got the name right because I've been wanting to remember the name. So thank you for having me. So yeah, my name is James, and I'm based in South Africa. For those that may not know, it's still a country in Africa. And as I've already mentioned, I don't know if those that are still just coming into the life, I'm doing my master's in medicine, specializing in vaccinology. So I get a lot of questions of, do you trust the vaccines and all kind of stuff? So that's the whole topic altogether. So I'm a YouTuber as well, but this is more like a part-time thing where my channel is called Roundtable Apologetics, and I started pretty recently, basically last year, I think last year or towards the beginning of the actually last year, that's when I started. And the very purpose of my channel was to actually have conversations both at a very philosophical level, but I'm still a baby at this, and also at a very, very basic level, because more often than not, at least from my culture and background, we've perceived philosophy as that abstract language that only a specific set group of people speak, and the rest of us ought to just stick in the basic way of understanding things. So I'm trying to bridge that gap between philosophy, most especially Christian philosophy, and the layman's terms, or rather theology within the context of the church. So I'm also trying to present the thoughtful perspective of Christianity, because I've also grown up in a context where majority of the beliefs was sort of just taught to me, and I never really got the time to actually very well critically assess this belief system. So it's only through what's it called, assessing some of these thought processes, some of these belief systems, and that's how I got to the understanding that maybe it's actually better to critically assess all these belief systems, both from the Christian perspective as well as those that are presented by the non-believers, and then see maybe at the end of the day we can have a belief system that is genuine and authentic. So that's I'm Christians actually. I'm actually Christian, so I believe in God, and I'm specifically a Christian theist, and not I don't subscribe to any other religion, at least not thus far. So that's briefly about me.
Cool. I'm an
Yeah.
atheist, by which I mean I believe that there's no evidence of a God. I think everything in the universe is best explained by naturalism, the natural forces that are unguided by any kind of a mind. Could you tell me some of the reasons you think there are for belief in a God? And I'll tell you my thoughts on those and hear your thoughts on my position.
Okay, so essentially from my perspective, I'd love to think that my Christian belief, rather position, is to a certain extent guided by a level of reason. So I do believe that or the basic part of it is that the belief system, alongside with analysis maybe from the scientific community and certain arguments that are presented both by the scientific and the atheist community, it seems that they both can work concurrently to support the belief system, which is the Christian faith. So maybe, of course, there's a lot of argumentation. I'm going to admit that I'm not very philosophically sound on these arguments, but there are certain argumentations that present themselves to be in favor of the Christian, or rather theistic worldview. And maybe we can look into the what's it called, the arguments from contingency. We can look at the arguments, rather the cosmological arguments. I'm just more familiar with the Kalam cosmological argumentation as opposed to other cosmological argumentations. Maybe we can look into talk about some of the analysis made on maybe the fine-tuning arguments and within in support of the Christian worldview. I mean, we can talk about even the moral argumentations. Probably you've had conversations with other theists about these arguments, but maybe these are some of the arguments, at least from my perspective, that I tend to look at and see that they create a cumulative case for Christianity. I've come across a few of the arguments from the atheistic perspective, maybe the divine hiddenness argument and what's it called, the problem of evil, logical and evidential. And those are the things that I'm still trying to assess and see. But so far, currently, I'm more inclined to believe the possibility or the probability of there being a God as opposed to there not being a God, based on the argumentation philosophically that I've encountered. But also, I also wouldn't undermine the experiences that I've had personally as a Christian, because those, to a certain extent, also do contribute to my belief system. Because in as much as you can argue that personal experience is not that reliable in the context of us understanding what is objectively true, that on a personal level does contribute to a certain level of belief in what I hold to be true, which is the Christian worldview. So there's a level of experience and there's a level of conviction and all that kind of stuff. That's briefly put.
Okay, so the first two you mentioned were the contingency argument and the cosmological arguments. Those are about
Yeah.
the same. Why do you think either of
Okay.
those or both of those indicate a god as opposed to just an unknown natural force?
So I do believe that I feel like if we were to argue, maybe specifically looking at the Kalam cosmological argument, and we are to make the premise that every single thing that began, or rather, the universe began to exist, and everything that begins to exist has a cause. And if we were to argue that the universe entails everything, that's including energy, time, space, and matter, that would rather logically eliminate any naturalistic explanation thus far. So if we were to argue that everything began, I mean, like the time, space, and matter and energy all began to exist at some particular point in time, that would necessarily exclude any naturalistic explanations, because naturalistic explanations are rather specific to space, time, energy, and matter, so to speak, right? So
Why do
anything outside
you
of that,
Why would you think that? Because no one in science thinks that. Like in the consensus in physics is that space and time are emergent from more fundamental physical things. So nobody who is a naturalist thinks that all natural things are in space, time, and matter. That seems to be something that theists kind of like put onto naturalists that we never actually accepted.
But I think then the naturalists would have to prove if there are anything other than space, time, matter, and energy that exists or that could possibly exist prior to that. Then that then is not it's a burden not on the theist to prove that they ought to be. I mean, the theist can only argue that outside of time, space, and matter, and energy as well, there ought to be something spaceless, timeless, matterless, and what's it called? Not confined to the constraints of energy as we understand it. And maybe that could potentially bring about these particular components, right? So then it's upon the naturalists to prove that there could potentially be something other than what we currently are aware of, to then suggest that that could potentially be the result of these particular things existing then.
So, what would be the difference between the naturalist and the theist here? So, we both agree that there's something before time, space, and matter. You say it's supernatural, I say it's natural, but both of them have zero evidence right now. So, why would you think that the naturalist holds the burden of proof and the theist doesn't?
I would propose that given the tendency in which most things, or let me call it most components that are very complexly arranged within the world that we find ourselves in. So I'm going to make more like an inductive argument, right? If you look at most of the things that seemingly are very well organized or very well arranged or present an intellectual arrangement within and of themselves, they seem to have a certain component of a mind or something that, let me just say, maybe if you look at a computer, for example, right, we can't necessarily say that a computer, what's it called, came about by purely a natural process, right? There could be a natural explanation for how the computer came about, right? But at the end of at the back of it, there is an understanding that there's potentially a mind that put together all these components within the natural world that then brought forth this particular computer for it to function the way it certainly or necessarily functions. So maybe I would presume rather follow through that if the universe happens to perform or function in a way that is, which seems to be in a, I think, at least with a level of purpose or soundness, or maybe to arise into those of us creatures that have like a sound mind or a conscience, then there is possibility, rather, there is a possibility of a mind being behind it or coming to place, as opposed to it being a random process. And this is me jumping on a lot of things, but that's in an abstract format. That's how I would understand it.
Yeah, that seems like the fine tuning argument, but that goes to a different argument. So it seems like just the cosmological argument that you presented isn't evidence. It's only
Mm.
if the fine tuning argument works, then the cosmological argument might indicate a God. But it seems like the cosmological argument on its own doesn't indicate a God at all. Just because you need to indicate a God, you need this fine tuning argument. You need a completely separate argument to make this
Okay,
argument work.
yeah, but I think at the end of the day, sorry, no, I'm not saying at the end of the day to just close the case. I'm proposing that whilst assessing the possibility of the existence of God, I would rather propose that it's more or less based on a cumulative case of majority of the arguments that are presented, as opposed to one case. So I don't necessarily argue that one case or one argument is going to exclusively prove the existence of God. For all you know, all it could prove is an object or a being or a substance that's just timeless, spaceless, and matterless. Then it calls for other arguments that then present a different facet of that particular thing, which then maybe can lead to the conclusion being God. And for all you know, what we refer to as God from our human perspective could simply be like a super powerful naturalistic mechanism that works, that is timeless, that is spaceless, that is matterless, that doesn't necessarily is not necessarily bound to the laws of this particular constraint of our universe, right? And then that brought forth the universe, right? So at the end of the day, we're simply ascribing a certain abstract thing that we don't understand as maybe God, right? So, but at the end of the day, if it pertains to our understanding of what or who God is, maybe from the Christian worldview, we understand that there is qualities of omnipotence, there's qualities of timelessness, there's qualities of um being all what's it called, omniscient and all that kind of stuff. So maybe when you look at those qualities and you parallel them to this particular abstract thing, then it's much more easier to make the conclusion that this particular thing that we're describing from the purely naturalistic perspective is more equivalent to what the Christians define as God, as opposed to purely a random natural process.
Well, so the first thing you said was that you're arguing for a cumulative case, which is fine, but you need at least one of the arguments that indicates a God versus a non-God. So, like, if none of the arguments indicate God more so than a non-God, then the cumulative case is zero. So you need at least one argument that indicates God more than non-God. And it seems like the cosmological argument doesn't do that. So the cosmological argument doesn't count as evidence for God at all. It just seems like nothing. It seems exactly like a zero because it works for both. There could be everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. The universe has a cause, but that cause could just be a quantum field. So it doesn't need to be a God. So the cosmological argument, because it works for both a God and a non-God equally, is exactly zero evidence for a God, it seems like, unless there's something in the cosmological argument that would indicate God over non-God. And that, when I asked for that, you brought up the teleological argument. That's a different argument. So we can go into the teleological argument next, but just using the cosmological argument, is there anything in just the cosmological argument that gives us a reason to think it's a God versus a not God?
I think what we need to maybe define is what we mean by the universe, right? Because if we were to argue that the universe consists of all, would you propose that quantum, whether what you call maybe a quantum field, doesn't necessarily subscribe to the definition of what matter or energy or space is, or could we?
Yes. So quantum fields exist outside of matter, energy, and space. They exist outside of our universe. So our universe
So
had
I
a
think no,
beginning at
no,
the, well, just to go into the physics a little bit,
okay.
our universe had a beginning at the Big Bang. Our universe is a space-time manifold. It's a field of space-time. And that had a beginning, but outside of that beginning was quantum fields. And the consensus in physics, the consensus among the experts in physics is that space and time are emergent from these quantum fields, the vector space or something along those
So
lines.
now it seems like even when you're creating that description, there is still a level. Because how do you then explain a quantum field without energy? If you are to argue that energy also began at the
Well,
maybe
no,
birth of what we understand as the universe.
well, energy didn't begin. There was energy cannot be created or destroyed. So there's no beginning to energy.
Okay. So now that's when we then suggest the proposal is that the beginning of the universe infers the beginning of energy, space, time, matter, and all that exists as it pertains to our understanding of what the universe is, right? So if we were to then argue that what's it called, um that even, and this is I don't know if this is could possibly work, but if we were to argue that even that conception of energy, if it doesn't have a beginning, maybe has a source in and of itself, right? We are then going to have to argue maybe that which we perceive of as energy, all right? Um, what kind of qualities does it have, right? Can they maybe can a quantum field end up creating a very sophisticated universe that we have currently? Can a quantum
Um,
field,
well,
what's it
just to
called?
clarify, in physics, energy wasn't created. It cannot be created and cannot be destroyed. So the Big Bang isn't the
Mhm.
creation of energy. Energy
No, no, no.
cannot.
No, no. I'm not assuming. I'm not suggesting that the Big Bang is the creation of energy, right? I'm assuming that if the composition of the universe consists of energy, right, energy, space, time, and matter, and whatever we have that, right, then we can, and we have the, let me call it. It could potentially be a contradiction. We have a contradiction that maybe the universe began to exist, right? Then we ought to have a conception of where if energy, because our understanding of the energy, rather our understanding of the non-beginningness of energy within the physics realm is also based on the physics laws that we currently understand, right?
Sure.
or the laws of physics that we currently understand, right? So if we are to argue that maybe can we potentially logically argue that an all-powerful being can work outside of the laws of physics? Can we potentially argue
Sure.
that? So if we
Sure.
can potentially argue that the being created all of this energy, matter, space, and time brought forth an energy, right, from wherever, we're not necessarily going to assume where because we can't potentially know. And by the constraints of our laws, maybe set these laws that we are trying to define about our universe. And can that potentially be an explanation in and of itself?
Well, you can assert it, but to me it seems like if we say there's a beginning to the universe we see, and all of the physics and all of the evidence we have says energy never was created, and you have a different theory that doesn't seem to have any evidence, it's just that God created energy, which would violate the first law of thermodynamics, which says energy cannot be created or destroyed. It seems like the better hypothesis here is the one that the scientists say, because they're saying there's no violation of the first law of thermodynamics. And so it's consistent with all of the known laws of physics, whereas yours is a violation of the known laws of physics and doesn't have any evidence. So it seems like the better explanation here is the physics one, not the God one. Because I can just say there's a magical leprechaun that created all space, time, and energy or whatever, but it's just an assertion. I've just made it up. Unless there's some independent evidence to support that, the fact that I can imagine it wouldn't actually be evidence. So it seems like um, all you've provided is that you can imagine God created space, time, and energy, and so you think he's an thing that you can assert as an explanation of the cosmological argument, but you haven't provided us a reason to think it is the explanation, because there could just be a naturalistic one, just like quantum fields. Quantum fields can explain the creation of our universe. They don't violate the first law of thermodynamics. Energy has always existed. That seems to be a better explanation here than yours,
Uh,
which violates the first law of
I don't
thermodynamics.
think I don't think I've come across a sophisticated physics that asserts that quantum physics is should I say, could be a very good explanation of the beginning of our universe. Maybe you could clarify on how they actually come to that, how you come to that conclusion.
Sure. So there's the consensus view in physics is called emergent space-time. You could just Google emergent space-time, and it's the view that space and time are not fundamental, and they came about from more fundamental things, and those more fundamental things are a kind of quantum field. And the way we came to this conclusion is by combining two other things that we've demonstrated. The Casimir effect. The Casimir effect has been demonstrated in a lab, which demonstrates that virtual particles are real. And the second thing is Goose early universe inflation. Goose early universe inflation was confirmed by measurements of the cosmic microwave background radiation. So both of these things, when you put these two independent things together, you get multiverse theory, essentially, is one of the possibilities. So we
Yeah,
look at
agree. Yeah. You go ahead. Sorry,
well,
I
yeah,
was
yeah.
listening.
So,
Go ahead.
so this model is a combination of principles, particles, and laws that have been confirmed to exist with empirical verified tests. Whereas your model
Yeah.
seems to be not, none of the properties of your model seem to be confirmed by any empirical tests. So even though we
Yeah.
haven't proven the multiverse, we obviously can't see other universes. We can see the parts of the theory. So all of the parts of the theory, virtual particles and early universe inflation, both of the parts have been demonstrated. And if we combine those two parts, we get the multiverse. Whereas yours has a bunch of parts and none of the parts have been demonstrated. And so it seems like this theory is a better theory because the parts haven't been demonstrated in the theory, whereas yours, the parts haven't been demonstrated. Thank you for the super chat, Kennedy. Appreciate it.
Okay, so I think at the end of the day, sorry, I like using the term at the end of the day, but I think I feel like no, I don't feel like. I think when it comes to the inflation model that you've spoken about it, even I think I've forgotten whether it's Vilenkin or one of the physicists that spoke about that. At the end of the day, even Vilenkin proves that that there is still, even with the inflation model, the question of the beginning, right? We see that even within the context of the inflation theory that gives rise to the possibility of a multiverse theory, right? There is still the idea that there is a beginning at the end of the day. So maybe we ought to then argue whether there is a beginning or no beginning, of
Well, I
whatever the
granted there's
universe
a
that we
beginning.
find ourselves
Remember,
in.
so I
Great.
granted there's a beginning. I just said the beginning is from the quantum fields. So I'm not arguing for an infinite regression here. I'm just saying there's a beginning, which is a quantum field.
So then are you suggesting that the quantum fields have eternally existed to bring about the beginning of this particular universe or multiverse?
Well, they existed outside of space-time, so if that's what you mean by eternally, sure.
Okay, so if we're to talk about even let's say the multiverse, are we suggesting that, of course, if you look at maybe the multiverse theory within the context of inflation, right, we are seeing portions of maybe space and time beginning within this particular inflatory, how do I call it? This within if you look at the inflation model, or maybe if I misrepresented, please correct me, but if we're to look at this inflation model, right, and there is the proposition of a multiversal theory, we see that even the universes that are beginning within this particular inflated thing have their own concept of space and time. So are we then suggesting there is various points within which spaces and times are being birthed? Are we suggesting there is one idea of space and time being birthed by the inflation model, where these particular multiversal um, stretches of space then present themselves? Is that what you're suggesting?
Uh, Both, essentially. So each universe can have its own space-time independent of the global space-time of the multiverse. And all of the space-times came about from a quantum field which existed outside of all of the space-times. So it created the
Mm.
one that's throughout all the multiverse and all of the ones that exist in the multiverse.
Okay, so that's good. So now with regards to what's it called? Are still arguing that there is a beginning, right? And there not being an eternal existence, we can maybe go to the second phase of maybe, I think it's the Kalam cosmological argument. So if we were to argue that maybe the quantum field, for some weird reason, is so we have two explanations. There is the quantum field possible explanation, and we have the theory of a God, right? And the next level of the Kalam cosmological argument then speaks about the personhood of this particular initiator of all of this creation that we're speaking about, right? Because if the prior event that brought about the beginning of these particular substances that we're talking about was impersonal, then the question is, why did it not bring things into existence eternally? Because if there is an eternal existence of an impersonal initiator of all of this that we're speaking about, then the things that it brought forth could have been brought back, rather, let's say they could have also existed eternally, right? Unless maybe you're proposing that at some particular before time, this quantum field didn't create anything until it created something that we're now experiencing.
Well, the quantum field exists outside of space-time, so
Yeah.
it can do anything essentially that God can do. You imagine God makes a decision to create the universe or something.
Mm,
A
mm,
quantum
mm, mm,
field can have a collapse, and the collapse can happen at an infinite amount of times. So, there's a thing in physics where the decay rate of uranium is known at a rate, but it can be at any random interval in the rate. So it's completely random. It can decay at 1 second, 2 seconds, 47 seconds, and it just picks. The quantum field picks the time at which it decays because of quantum randomness. So, because of quantum randomness, the time at which the universe began is the time the quantum field picked. It doesn't need a consciousness for this. That's just how quantum fields work. So, because of the randomness interval, there could be an infinite amount of times before when it picked, because like if it picks 47, there's infinitely many numbers before 47. You just keep counting backwards. But it picked 47. And so, because quantum fields can collapse at particular times in an infinite range, that's why the universe began to exist when it did and not infinitely before when it did.
Okay, so I think I think now what you're proposing is that given that the quantum field can rather do whatever it does at a random state, right? I feel like this particular explanation is purely on the basis of what's it called? The explanation of what example did you give? Uranium?
Uranium decay, so there's many different
Uranium
things.
decay, yeah. So I feel like most of this particular the explanation of how a quantum field could potentially or possibly work outside of space and time is on the basis of how the quantum field works within time space. So then how do you argue that that could be the case in the context of outside of space and time? And actually, when you're talking about the um, how actually quantum mechanics works, right? How do you come to the understanding of that outside of space and time if you've never actually maybe made that observation?
Because you can
Aren't you then
solve the
appealing to
equations.
speculation? Okay,
No, you make testable predictions. So the way they came to this conclusion was they looked at the equations for general and special relativity, and they showed that they can take out, because time is the lambda in the equation, so you can take the lambda out
okay,
of the equations and solve the equations. That means time isn't necessary to solve the equations to have some kind of interactions. You can have interactions without time. And they said, well, if this is the case, what would we expect to see? And then they started to make predictions. They said, well, if this is the case, and time is not fundamental to these equations, then there's going to be some kind of feature to the world that's going to look very funny. The things like they discovered were entanglement, particle duality, and they did these experiments called the delayed quantum eraser. Said, well, if it works outside of time, then we're going to see this very silly thing where they can collapse at one point and then go back in time and affect the spin of the other one, because they're outside of time, and that's what they see. In the delayed quantum eraser, they have two entangled particles that go in different directions. One hits a barrier before the other one, but the second one is the one that's measured. And what it causes is it seems like it goes back in time and affects the first one, essentially. So we can show with empirical demonstration that the predictions made by this model, that if quantum fields exist outside of space-time, here's what we will see. We do the experiments and we see the results. And so we have good reason to believe that space and time are emergent from more fundamental things that are outside of space-time.
okay. So now, if let's give that space and time are emerging from those what's it called, more fundamental things, right? I still don't see how this rules out the explanation of God,
It
right?
doesn't. It
Because
doesn't. It
we
doesn't.
could still
It doesn't. You're right.
okay,
It doesn't
okay,
rule out God, but it gives evidence
okay.
for the natural model. So the
I think
natural model
yeah,
makes predictions, which has evidence, whereas your model doesn't have any evidence. So like the natural
I
model
think
doesn't rule out magical leprechauns either, but there's no evidence for magical leprechauns where there is evidence for the natural model. That's why the natural model is a better one.
I think it's also, let's maybe look at the example of a boiling kettle. If, for example, I chose or decided to put a kettle on the fire, there is very, very plausible explanations as to how the water begins to boil. However, there's no evidence as to the reasons that I could potentially have put that kettle onto the fire, right? There is no explanation as to how the kettle actually moved from a place without maybe a heat point of hit to the place where it has hit or something like that. So at the end of the day, I think what we're left with is a natural explanation of a certain mechanism, but we don't necessarily have what's it called? We don't necessarily have what could have potentially led to that, right? So then we have two theories. We have a theory that explains how water boils, and maybe we don't necessarily have access to the reasons as to why the water is boiling in the first place. So it give it the natural rather the scientific explanation I would propose is simply how we then come to understand how maybe the world works, right? But that in and of itself ought not to eliminate the possibility of maybe what led to the world working in that particular way, right? So if we were to still argue, let's give that maybe space and time is emergent from the quantum influx or whatever explanation there could be, whatever other explanation they could be, right? That in of itself doesn't actually bring forth, doesn't eradicate, as I mean, you've already made mention or rather agreed that doesn't necessarily eradicate the idea of there being a personal being or object or substance that brings forth or maybe brings forth a universe from the quantum field. All we are seeing is we're arguing that the quantum field brings forth the universe, but or rather, that's the mechanism by which the universe comes forth. But we're not necessarily eradicating or eliminating that. That could also be a way via which God actually brings forth the universe. So at the end of the day, if I'm to contrast that idea of me believing that all this happened just at random, as opposed to there being a possible explanation for why maybe the universe works in that particular way, I'd rather buy into the possibility of there being an explanation as to why maybe the universe works in that particular way and then brought forth certain what's it called, certain attributes that maybe we've subscribed as time, space, and matter that we're currently seeing now. So at the end of the day, if we have two theories of the emergence or the beginning of the universe, and they both are equally powerfully as explanatory, then it seems to me that there is no favoring one over the other. And if there is no one favoring over the other, it goes back to a matter of preference, isn't it?
Sure, but I don't think those are equal. So to me, that seemed like a God of the gaps argument. So like
Mm-hmm,
science makes progress, makes testable predictions which are confirmed, whereas the God
mm-hmm,
hypothesis doesn't
mm-hmm,
make. It's just well, science hasn't gotten to this next step yet. We're going to say God is in this next step, and
mm-hmm,
then science solves that problem, and then like, oh, well, God wasn't there. We're just going to put him back a step. The problem with that kind of thinking is that there's not just two theories there. There's infinitely many. There's infinitely
mm-hmm,
many theories science doesn't disprove. Like maybe it's magic leprechauns or magic unicorns or ectoplasm or ghosts or the Dharma from other religions. There's infinitely many
mm-hmm,
things that could have caused the origin of the universe, but none of those have
mm-hmm.
evidence. So the fact that science has shown that space and time is emergent shows that that model is the closest to truth. It is the most reasonable to believe because it's the one that's making progress and being able to tell us about the universe before we know it. So it can
Mm-hmm.
make predictions that are correct that we will discover in the future, whereas none of the other ones do. There's infinitely many other ones: God, leprechauns, fairies, pixies. They all could be true. Science hasn't disproven them, but none of them have made progress, which means of all of the possible theories to explain the Big Bang, the best theory is the one that has made progress, testable predictions, the science. And all of the other ones are
Um,
on equal
mhm.
footing. So the leprechauns and God and fairies are all on equal footing, whereas science is better than all of those because it's made progress, making
um, I think
predictions.
um, I think what I'm trying to propose is not that there is some level of what's it called, what's it called, how to call it. I'm not proposing a conflict between science and God, right? I think my analysis or rather argument is that God could potentially, possibly have used the mechanism of science, that which you explained through the scientific method, to bring forth the universe, right? So I'm not necessarily arguing a God of the gaps that it's God until science explains it. My argument is that that explanation that is given by God could possibly have been used by God to bring forth the universe. So even in the whole, I could still say God allowed for the mechanism by which a man and a woman come together and conceive of another offspring, right? Or conceive of that offspring. In that regard, I'm simply arguing that there is an explanation or there is an understanding of how conception occurs. And there is a scientific explanation, but that doesn't necessarily draw God out of the equation, because my argument is that God put that particular mechanism to work that particular way, maybe for a particular cause or for a particular purpose. And that's why maybe we distinguish between a purposeless, a meaningless, a random universe, as opposed to a universe that has a set of purpose or a certain concept of purpose and meaning ascribed to it, right? So we both have an explanation of how the universe came forth, right? And my argument is that that understanding as brought forth by the scientific method is simply a way to show how things were done, maybe by an all-powerful and all-knowing God. And maybe your analysis is that that explanation that science is giving is purely expressive of a random natural process that ought to occur if the natural world is all that there is, right? So now we both have explanations, and my argument is that I don't believe that that explanation that the method is giving is all that there is, right? My argument is that there is a, let me call it, to lack of a better word, a hand behind the processes that the scientific method is trying to explain. And then your argument is that there's not hand at all. It's simply something happening at random. I would propose that's where the distinction is. So the distinction is not science versus God. The distinction is what science is explaining. Is it purely all there is, or could there be a hand behind it?
Right, but I think that's literally just the God of the gaps argument. And let me explain to you why. Imagine
Okay.
that we see a cup fall over. There's like a table, we see a cup fall over, and we want to explain what caused the cup to fall over. I think it's just random natural processes, and somebody else thinks it's a magical leprechaun. Now, I'm thinking it's natural processes, and I say, well, if it's natural processes, we can discover that it was actually the wind, because we'll find leaves near the table or whatever, and we look and there's leaves. So it's like, okay, that's good evidence of wind. And he says, well, no, 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 no. You see, maybe the leprechauns caused the wind. That's why we see the leaves in the cup fall over. So I haven't disproven his theory that it's the leprechauns, even though mine has told us about the area and has given us a prediction about the leaves, and we've demonstrated it was the wind that knocked over the cup. He could just say, oh, no, 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 but it's fine because the leprechauns, they caused the wind. And I'm like, no, I think what caused the wind was a natural process. And we can demonstrate that because I think wind is caused by pressure differentials in the atmosphere. And we can test the pressure differentials in the atmosphere. Like, yep, wind is caused by pressure differentials in the atmosphere, not leprechauns. And the leprechaun guy could be like, oh, no, wait, but those pressure differentials, those could be caused by leprechauns. So even though leprechauns didn't cause the cup to fall over and they didn't cause the wind, they caused the pressure differentials that caused the wind, that caused the leaves. And so every different thing I could explain, I could then explain the pressure differentials, and I could explain the temperature difference in particles in the atmosphere, which is caused by rotation of the Earth and heating of the sun. I can continue to go back infinitely, and he can continue to say, well, even though that wasn't caused by the leprechauns, the thing before it was. And you can just say that infinitely. You can just keep
No, I
saying,
think yeah. So I think where I would distinguish myself from the cause of the gap analysis is not necessarily to say that we're pushing back the cause of something as far as science knows, because that would be the God of the gaps argumentation, right? My analysis is that, using the very example that you gave, is that the mechanism, let's assume that the wind actually caused the cup to fall down, right? The mechanism by which what's it called, the wind actually has the pressure to push the cup over, right? That mechanism was potentially, in this case, we're using the leprechaun. Maybe that mechanism in this case was put forth in that particular way by the leprechaun, right? At the end of the day, we're not suggesting, or rather, the analysis is not that the leprechaun literally pushed the cup over. The analysis is that whatever mechanism by which the cup fell, to whatever degree that you want to explain it scientifically, that mechanism was made possible by a certain, if what we're calling intelligible leprechaun, right? So we're not arguing that what's it called, the leprechaun caused this to be, in a sense. We're arguing that the leprechaun set forth a mechanism that then can be explained through the scientific method. I think that's my argumentation. Right from when maybe gravity, maybe the wind pushes the cup, gravity pulls the cup to the ground, the cup breaks because of whatever energy distribution within the cup. All those mechanisms that bring forth the cup from a certain point, a certain position to fall onto the ground, all those mechanisms could have been set forth by a certain intelligible being, right? For whatever reason, we do not know. Similarly, just like maybe initially when I made the example of the boiling kettle, right? At the end of the day, maybe you can explain how mitochondria generates energy within my body, and maybe how that interacts with my brain thinking about me wanting a cup of coffee, and then me putting the kettle on the stove, and me, so all those mechanisms, right, work with me to put the kettle onto the stove for me to boil the tea that I want to drink because I'm hungry, right? But at the end of the day, the reason, let me say, the reason behind why I'm putting the kettle onto the stove is because I'm hungry. But the process by which I put the kettle on the stove can simply be explained scientifically. So at the end of the day, I'm not necessarily pushing the cause of why the kettle is on the stove. I'm simply suggesting that maybe there is an explanation alongside the scientific explanation that brings forth the water to boil on top of a stove. So
right. So I
I don't know if you
understand.
get
I
the difference.
understand your argument, but your argument is
Yeah.
literally the God of the gaps fallacy. We can prove that that argument is bad. It's a bad argument. Thank you for the super chat, native atheist. I appreciate it. And I'm trying to explain to you why we can prove this is bad. Now, if I say,
Mhm.
what caused the cup to fall over, and you say leprechauns, and I say, no, it's not leprechauns, it's the wind, and we prove it's the wind, we demonstrate it's the wind, 100% certainty we know it was the wind, and you say, oh, well, actually, the leprechaun caused the wind. And I'm like, no, it wasn't the leprechaun that caused the wind. It was the pressure differentials. And we demonstrate it's the pressure differentials. And then the guy could say, no, but the pressure differentials, those were caused by the leprechaun. You can always add on. You can always say exactly what you said. Even though we've demonstrated everything there is to demonstrate right there, well, maybe there's some other thing we haven't demonstrated yet. But the problem with this is everyone can say that. There could literally just be another guy that could come up and say, it's not a leprechaun, it's a unicorn. And another guy that could come up and say, it's not a unicorn or a leprechaun, it's a ghost. A ghost knocked the cup over. There are infinitely many people who could always come on and say, well, there's one more thing that could explain that. Even though we know that the wind knocked over the cup, what explains that is this other thing that I've asserted that has no evidence yet. Anybody could say that. There's infinitely many of those. But the only hypothesis that has evidence right now is the natural forces. That's the only one that said, if my theory is true, here's something we can expect to see, and then it sees it. That's evidence. That's real evidence that whoever is making those predictions can tell you the future because they know what's going on in the world. And so if the naturalistic hypothesis can be tell you the future, and none of the others can. None of the others have ever been able to tell you the future. All they can do is say, well, maybe that stuff science is discovering, well, we can explain that by leprechauns or fairies or ghosts, and just insert one of the hypotheses. None of those are supported. None of those are good because they haven't made predictions. They have no evidence. But the one that does have evidence is the one that predicted all of those things in the first place. And so if we're comparing the two models here, God or naturalistic hypotheses, because the naturalistic hypothesis was able to make the predictions to explain all of this stuff, the quantum fields, the emergent space-time, everything in physics, and was successful at this, the fact that you can say, well, maybe that was explained by God, or maybe that was explained by leprechauns, or maybe that was explained by Dharma, none of those are supported. Those are all bad hypotheses because they weren't able to tell us anything about the future that it got right, whereas the scientific one did that. So even though you're right, you can always say, well, maybe that thing we discovered was explained by something else we haven't discovered yet. That isn't good evidence because anybody can say that.
I think when I continue to look at the analysis that we're actually making right now, I feel like what distinguishes maybe the atheist from the theist is not necessarily whether they do agree or disagree with the naturalistic method of, or rather what I would call this scientific method of understanding the world, right? Because at the end of the day, on both sides of the arguments, we can still acknowledge that the scientific methods makes us understand how the world works, at least from purely physical. It gives us, which word should I use? It gives us, due to lack of a better word, I'm going to put it as simple as this. The scientific method is the process by which the world works, right? So now what necessarily, we both do agree that via the scientific methods, we can understand how the world works or maybe how the world came to be. But where we disagree between the theist and the atheist is to argue whether they be a reason or explanation behind how the world works, as opposed to there no being reason or explanation behind how the world works, right? It's like suggesting that I could still use, because I still would beg to defer that I'm appealing to the God of the gaps fallacy. I would still use the kettle example where at the end of the day, there is reason behind why I'm putting the kettle on the stove, right?
Well,
And
let
that
me try to
reason
explain it in a
is
different way for one
irrespective.
sec.
Yeah.
So imagine we see a dice on the table, like a 6-sided dice, and it's on a 3. Now, it's possible somebody deliberately put the dice there. He's like, I really like the number 3. I'm going to put it on a 3. It's possible it just like was blown by the wind and just happened to fall on a 3. Or it's possible the dice is weighted. Like there's a weight in the dice, so no matter who throws it, it's always going to land 3 because the weight forces it to land 3. It's a cheater's dice. Now, you could always say, no matter what number we see, well, maybe somebody put it there. There was some guy who really liked the number 3 and he put it there. But if I say, no, it was the wind, and I say I can show it was the wind because here's all the evidence of the wind, that's a better explanation. It's a better way to explain the data. You could always say, well, I think someone has some intent behind this number 3 on the dice. But you'd be wrong. Like it was just random. It just randomly happened because the winds knocked the dice over and it landed 3. Now, could you say, well, maybe the wind had an intent by it? Maybe the guy intended the wind to knock it over to the 3? Sure, you can always say that, but it's a bad explanation. So simply saying that, well, there could be an intent behind it isn't evidence. It's evidence of nothing. You can't say, well, science explained the 3, but there could be this other thing, because that's not evidence. You haven't shown the other thing is real. You would still need evidence the other thing is real, not just simply say, well, this other thing could exist that could explain the science. That's not evidence. That's a God of the gaps. So in order for your argument to be supported, you would need some evidence that this thing happened, not just that it could be there, but that it actually is there. And simply saying that it could explain the data doesn't do that.
Okay, so great. I do understand where you're coming from, and I do understand the explanation that you're trying to present, right? How do I what I can say is that maybe we're missing where what I'm trying to say in this particular case, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're to look at maybe if I'm to argue that there is reason for why the person put the three there or not, or why the person rolled the die to a number three or not, right? There is no scientific way of measuring the reason behind that particular outcome, right?
But
So
yeah,
if
there
you are to
is.
make, okay, so let's assume that let's assume someone actually rolled the dice, right? Let's assume someone actually rolled the dice without a method of assessing that someone could potentially have rolled the dice. You're only going to end up with a naturalistic explanation of how the die could have rolled to that particular value that he rolled onto, right? Maybe in this particular case, let's even assume there was no wind, right? Or that you're going to give an explanation as to how the die could have potentially rolled from a certain position to another position. Maybe you're going to appeal to the forces of nature, maybe the force of gravity, because maybe at some point in time it was at an elevated space to another elevated space, the forces of gravity, right? But my argument is that in the context where the person rolls the dice, right, whether the person rolled the dice or not, there's a force of gravity that's going to act on the die, right, for it to end up in that particular position that it ended up. So you using maybe the force of gravity as the explanation for why the die rolled from a certain point of elevation to a certain point of what's it called, to a certain level, doesn't necessarily eradicate there being someone rolling the die and also it appealing or rather being affected by the forces of gravity for it to end up in the position that it ended up at. So maybe where the distinction that I'm trying to draw is that there is what's it called? There is an explanation for how the die could have possibly ended up in that particular way, right? And that explanation could also complement the action of an intelligible being performing that particular action, right?
Right, right. I
An
understand. I
intelligible
understand that
being.
argument. It's still
Yes.
wrong, though. I can prove that argument wrong. Let me try a different way. So let's say
Okay.
I am the only person that exists in the universe. There are no other people that we've ever seen. And there's a
Okay.
dice on the table, and it rolled three. It's very windy outside. And so we can say it was caused by the wind. Now, you could
Mm,
say, well, maybe there's just another person that has zero evidence. We've never seen another person. Maybe the other person did it, but I can say there's no evidence of another person. We've literally never seen another person anywhere in the universe. It's just you and me. It's just us. We're the only people that we've ever seen in the universe. And we see a dice on the table with a three. We know there's a lot of wind. The wind could explain the dice on the table. But you say, but it could be another invisible person we've never seen. That's a terrible argument because there's no evidence of that person existing. Saying it could be there isn't evidence. So simply saying it could be God, if you don't actually provide evidence, isn't anything. It's nothing. It's just saying there could be another thing that we have literally no evidence for, like leprechauns. It could be a leprechaun that did it. It's not not a good argument. You need evidence in order to support that there is the thing there, not simply say, well, there could be a thing there. Does that make
mm.
sense?
But that makes sense. But what if that which explains the die rolling to a three doesn't have a form of what's it called? Doesn't have a method via which you can prove that to be the case. What I'm talking about is, remember at the end of the day, when we're making the kettle analogy, when we're making the die analogy, maybe there is a reason for why the person rolled a three. Let's assume maybe that reason is whatever the case may be, the die was duped to roll at three, right? And this particular person has a reason to roll a three, maybe to win a particular gambling game, right? The scientific method won't necessarily prove, or rather, won't have a method by which to prove that there is a reason or the reason for the rolling of the die made it to roll the die to a
Wait,
three. I
science
think
can
what
do
I'm
that.
drawing to,
Science can
yes,
easily do
no,
that. So
no,
I can say,
no, what I'm saying is that science can't prove the reason
yes, it
behind
can.
something.
Yes, it can. Science can do that. So I can say, Bob rolled the dice and he's a three. We're going to go ask him, hey, Bob, did you roll the dice? He's like, yeah, I rolled the dice. So if, hey, I just provided evidence of this
No, no,
third
but no,
person.
but then at the end of the day, we're looking at a context where you found the die there, and the
Yep.
person that didn't roll the die is not accessible to that particular
Well, that's
method
the thing.
via
That's the
which you're
thing.
trying to prove how it came about.
The only
Right.
time you could
Mm.
ever say someone else rolled the dice is if you had evidence of the other person. So if you could talk to the other person, if you could ask the other person, if you had a video recording of the other person, the only time it's ever rational to say a person rolled this dice is if you have evidence the other person exists. If you have no evidence the other person
Mm-hmm.
exists, it's never, ever, ever rational to say a person who I have no evidence exists rolled this dice. That's
But
irrational.
I think then that gets us to my initial statement where I say that there are certain observable patterns that we observe, right? That then allude to things beyond that which is observable, right? So if you can, you see like how you made an observation that within maybe the mathematics formula and even the degradation of uranium, there is certain what's it called? There are certain, I mean, quantum influx works in a particular way that's close to random, right? And then you make that allusion to how they could have possibly been a random emergent of the universe at a given point in time, right? I don't know if you're getting
Sort
where I'm
of.
coming from.
Not
Oh,
not
so
sure.
what I'm getting to is that when you observe certain patterns within the universe, or rather within observable matter or observable things, you can make assumptions or allusions to things that are not directly observable or are not directly accessible to
Yep.
the scientific method, right?
Yes.
So when you're then making the argumentation that maybe most of the things that we see here, remember initially I was making that induction argument that most of the things that we see that are very complex, that are arranged in a complex manner to perform or reach a certain goal or a certain cause, right, tend to have certain minds behind them, right? So we can't wake up one day and say maybe the computer created itself over a random process. We can scientifically show how a computer functions, right? But the functionality of the computer and its what's it called? What's it called?
Processor?
No, not necessarily the processor, and how it ends up, I think the functionality of the computer and how it ends up working in that particular way seems to suggest that there is a reason for why, seems to suggest that there is maybe a mind behind why these particular components were arranged to perform certain functionalities and also end up being the way that they possibly are. So maybe when you argue that if you don't, let's say in this particular context of the dice, right? If there is no access to the person that rolled the dice, maybe if you had previous experiences that whenever you see dice, we've always seen that people roll dice, right? We've always seen there could still be an explanation that the wind blew the dice, right? But given our previous experiences or our previous observations that there is the explanation or the possibility of the explanation that people also roll dice, or there is the explanation that there is other factors that could bring about that particular outcome of an event, then we don't rule out those factors simply because we don't have a scientific method that gives us access to those factors, right?
Right.
It's like
Yes.
if, yeah.
But there, we
So
don't
in
have
that
any of
particular
examples of
context,
that. That's the point. Is that there are no examples of where we see minds creating the universe. That's not a thing. We've never seen that. Now, you brought up the fine tuning argument, but again, that's a separate argument. So my question was: is does anything in the cosmological argument on its own, without ever referencing the teleological argument, does the cosmological argument indicate a god? And right now, it seems like no. It seems like in order to indicate a god, you need the fine tuning argument, and so the cosmological argument doesn't work. It doesn't indicate a god
mhm.
because it seems what happens is you always move to the teleological argument, and there's not you can't find anything in the cosmological argument on its own that indicates a god.
I think it indicates certain qualities of a God, right? It doesn't necessarily conclude that there is a God, right? I would propose that it concludes, or rather brings forth certain characteristics of what religious or theists would define as God, right? So when you're talking about the quality of, because at the end of the day, we've ended up with maybe two theories here. We've ended up with the possibility of the quantum influx, and we've ended up with the possibility of a God. And what do these two things have in common? These two things happen to be timeless.
Sure,
These two things happen to be spaceless. These two things happen to bring about the emergency of the universe at a
sure.
particular point in time, right? Because it can't exist eternally. So these two things, what we've maybe failed to conclude is whether these two things could one thing have a mind and the other not have a mind. I mean, what we see here, the difference is that, or the distinction is that one thing could potentially have a mind and the other thing doesn't have a mind, because we believe that minds are those that have reason behind doing certain things or bringing about certain things. Because so at the end of the day, we've eradicated a whole lot of God or theodicies, or let's say ideas that are that maybe bring about the analogy of the supernatural, right? And what I'm arguing is that we've eradicated all those, let me call them time constrained gods. We've eradicated the matter constrained ideas of gods. We've eradicated a lot of ideas that are constrained to time, space, and matter. So now we're left with a spaceless, we're left with a timeless, we're left with at least a certain idea or an object that has these particular qualities that in part are subscribed to the idea of the Christian God.
Well, sure,
So
sure.
yes, it
I
has raised.
agree. I agree with all of that, but
So
none of that's actually evidence of a god, because that's just
no,
saying
no, but it increases. It's not necessarily evidence of a God, but it increases the probability of the conclusion being God.
no, because
It
this
does, though.
because it increases the probability of it being God and it being not God equally. So it excludes a natural thing that is space, and it excludes a natural thing that is time, and it excludes a God in space and a God in time. But it excludes them both equally. But so it doesn't actually indicate God more than non-God. It indicates God and naturalism exactly the same. It doesn't differentiate. The cosmological argument can't tell the difference of whether or not God or not God created the universe. It just says something created the universe. So if I said something knocked over the cup, that's not evidence of a god, and it's not evidence of a unicorn or evidence of a leprechaun. It's just saying we have no idea what it is. That's all the
No,
cosmological argument is doing. It's saying we don't know what it is, but it's spaceless and timeless. But so that doesn't say God.
but
Nowhere in
I
there does it
don't.
say God.
Okay, so I don't think it simply alludes, or rather comes brings us to the conclusion that anything could have created the universe,
Right, right,
because at
right.
the
I
end of
agree.
the
I
day,
agree. But
yes, yes.
remember, at the beginning I asked, what reason do we have to believe a God exists? Which means it has to be a reason that supports God more than not God. So saying that there's a certain kind of thing that created the universe is fine. I'm happy with that. But you haven't provided evidence of a God over a non-God. That's what I'm looking for. When I ask for evidence of a God, I don't want specific qualities that God might have. I want to know why, what evidence is there that supports God over non-God? And it doesn't seem like the cosmological argument does that. It seems like you admit it doesn't do that. It tries to support certain kinds of qualities that whatever created the universe must have, which I am fine with. But one of those qualities isn't consciousness. Consciousness is nowhere in those qualities. There's no God indicated in any of that. So it doesn't seem like the cosmological argument works as evidence of a God. And then you brought up the
Mhm.
teleological argument. If you want, we can go to that one.
Maybe to we can maybe try dissecting, maybe going to the contingency argument before the teleological argument, because remember at the beginning, I made mention of the fact that at the end of the day, if we were to argue the probability of God over non-God, right, it's more or less a cumulative case as opposed to a one argument fits all kind of case, right? Oh, my
I
laptop's
agree with
about to
that, but
die.
again, there has to be one argument that indicates God more than not God. Because if all of the arguments indicate God and not God equally, then that's 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 equals 0. So the cumulative case can only work if there's at least one argument that indicates God more than not God.
But then I think, sorry, my laptop is about to die. Can I catch my charger real quick? I'm just gonna bring my charger real quick. Um, okay, so let me plug it here. Okay, great. So I think what I was trying to say is that in the case of it, what's it called, raising the probability of God as opposed to, or rather in contrast to other things, or other as opposed to other explanations, right? Because at the end of the day, we both agree that it has narrowed down to what's it called. If there was, let's say, a possibility that 100 things created the universe, right? And maybe by means of that which could have possibly created the universe, rather, if you narrow down Now, if you then create a category of that which could have possibly created the universe, as you say, that which could be maybe time, space, matter, and all that kind of stuff. So this particular thing ought to be outside of those things. We've then narrowed down the possibility to maybe from 100 to 2, right? And if we've narrowed down the explanation from 100 to 2, that increases the probability of those two explanations as causes or creators of that particular thing that we're trying to discuss, right? So
Sure,
when
sure.
then
But
when I
remember,
then
my question
mm,
isn't what are the things that didn't create the universe? Because I don't care. I don't. There's infinitely many things that didn't create the universe, and I don't need to know anything about any of them. I don't. I don't. Doesn't matter. A round square didn't create the universe. That's great. What I need to know is why should we think God is the better explanation than not God? So no matter what, if I eliminate round squares, that isn't evidence of God because it doesn't support God more than not God. And what I need when I ask for evidence of God is I need something that indicates God more than not God. I don't need some abstract thing that you can eliminate says, well, God is better than a round square. I don't care. I want to know why is God a better explanation than a not God?
okay. Okay, so I do understand where you're coming from, and I just wanted to put it out that like at the end of the day there is still like an increasing in the probability, but that's not what necessarily you're interested in. So maybe at the end of the day, if we to speak into, like I said, the cumulative case for God, then that's when we look at a lot of arguments, because I would propose that no argumentation by itself or in and of itself is proof enough for the existence of God,
Oh,
right?
right, right. I don't need
But
proof.
I
I just need one argument that indicates God more than not God.
Okay, so now if we're maybe to look at, we can maybe go into the contingency argument, because at the end of the day, and by this, I'm not suggesting that the Kalam cosmological argument does not have an explanatory power whatsoever, because at the end of the day, it would still go back to speak into all the other arguments cumulatively. But then maybe we can look into what's it called? What's your understanding of what the contingency argument is? Because I don't want us to maybe have a different understanding of what it is, and then we're both arguing across each other. So maybe what could be your understanding of the contingency argument? Or maybe since I'm the less philosophically experienced, I'll just tell you what I think it is, right?
Sure, go for it.
Great. And if maybe, and if we were to say that it is also similar to the Kalam cosmological argument, but it further argues that everything that exists has an explanation of its own existence, right? And if maybe the universe began to exist, then it ought to have the explanation of its own existence outside of itself, right? And it further assumes that things, what's it called? Um, Things that have an explanation in and of themselves are things that tend to be necessary. So things that necessarily exist are things that tend to have an explanation of their existence in and of themselves. And of so far, our understanding is that there is only things that necessarily exist are abstract objects, right?
No,
Abstract objects
no. So,
necessarily.
so I would disagree there. I'd say that a necessary thing is we can say anything is a necessary thing. A pineapple could be a necessary thing. So I would say that the probability that God is the necessary thing is equally the same as the quantum field is the necessary thing. So I'd say that there's no reason to think that God is more likely the necessary thing than the quantum field.
Why would you say that though? So if we're
Because
to argue, could you possibly think of a world where quantum fields don't exist?
I can think of a world without quantum fields in the exact same way I can think of a world without God.
No, I think so maybe let's put it this way. Could you conceive of a world, this is logically speaking, could you conceive of a world where a triomni God doesn't exist?
Yes.
But if you're to argue that a triomni God by his or her explanation is the one that is all powerful, all knowing, God exists, and all that kind of stuff, how could you then logically come to the conclusion that a triomni God cannot exist in a particular world?
Because I can
Is that God
imagine
still triomni?
I can imagine a particular world where there's nothing.
But if how would you define a world with nothing? Because if the world at all exists, then that can't be nothing.
A world that contains no contents is a world that exists, but inside of it, it is nothing. So no God exists in this world. I could exist a world with just a pineapple. The world has a pineapple in it and nothing else. No gods.
But if you're to logically argue that this particular idea of a God that we're speaking about is a God that is all powerful, and that particular all powerful, or rather tri-omni God, then doesn't exist in the world, then that idea of a God ceases to be. It's like saying you can't come to a conclusion. If you argue that the first premise is maybe a tri-omni God exists, of course, we haven't demonstrated exclusively that he does or she does. That if we are to argue that a tri-omni God exists, right? And if you are to, for some weird reason, accept that premise that a tri-omni God exists, it logic follows that there is no possible world that a tri-omni God cannot exist.
No.
Because if a tri-omni God exists necessarily, then there is no possible world a tri-omni God cannot exist.
Well, no, again, so you can define anything as being necessary. I can define a pineapple as being necessary. It is by definition that pineapples are magically necessary. Definitionally. Can I imagine a world without pineapples? Yes. Does that prove that they're not necessary? No, it just proves I can imagine a world without pineapples. So you can imagine God has this definition of being necessary and must exist in all possible worlds. And I can imagine a world where there's literally nothing, or just a pineapple, or just the Dharma, or just a God eater that eats all gods in the universe. And so God was there, but he got eaten by the God eater. So in philosophy, the possible worlds argument doesn't work because you can literally imagine worlds that are just have one thing in them: a brick, a pineapple, potato.
But does that not but do you think that then creates a contradiction in of itself? If you were to argue that this particular thing is necessary, this particular thing necessarily exists, and then you still argue that then you can conceive of the world where this that which you classified as a necessarily existing being doesn't exist, does
No,
that then not contradict the necessity of this particular thing?
no, it doesn't, because you can imagine a set of worlds in which all of the worlds contains an object, and then you can imagine a different set of worlds that don't. So, for example, I can say, I imagine that there is a necessary pineapple. All possible worlds has a pineapple in it. Then I can say, okay, I imagine a world where pineapples are not necessary, and they're not in every possible world. So I can imagine both cases, and they could both be true or both be false, like independently, like not at the same time. And so I can imagine the thing has the property of being necessary, but be wrong. So I can imagine God is necessary and to be wrong, in which case he doesn't exist. So you can simply give the definition. You can say he's necessary, but be wrong.
Okay, so now, so the argumentation is no longer about whether they, what's it called, they necessarily, whether they exist in all possible worlds. It's more about whether they be necessary or not. Because at a point in time where they don't exist in a particular possible world, then they cease to be necessary. Is that what you're arguing?
Sort of, yes. So necessary is essentially an arbitrary label that we can apply to anything. You just say it's necessary, and we can all be wrong. A potato is necessary. Like clearly, that's probably not correct. Probably wrong that potatoes are necessary. But we can say the words. We can have the idea of a potato that is it is impossible to imagine a universe without a potato. But what we imagine is irrelevant. It's literally irrelevant what we can or can't imagine. It tells us nothing about reality. So maybe we can imagine an alien species that imprints in all of our brains and makes it impossible for any human being to imagine a universe without a potato. Does that make potatoes necessary? No, it doesn't. No. So the fact that we can define it as necessary, or that our brains define it as necessary, tells us nothing about reality. So the fact that you claim God is necessary is no different from me claiming a potato is necessary. There's no evidence to support that. It's just an assertion.
But I don't think it necessarily is, because at the point where you claim that a potato is possibly necessary, you still haven't what's it called? You still haven't taken into account the other character traits that could be ascribed to the potato. So if you then speak about a potato that is necessary but still bound to the laws of physics of decay, then that potato ceases to be, maybe ceases to hold those character traits that would potentially subscribe to a god, right?
No.
Because at the end of the day, remember at the end of the day, if you're to say that a potato exists, right? Remember, as we're arguing the necessity of this particular being, right? We're also in turn or cumulatively arguing that this potential being, while they be necessary, they timeless, right? They spaceless, right? They matterless, right? And matterless, I don't mean matter in that sense, but matter in the scientific sense. They matter,
Well, no,
right?
like
And
a necessary being could be in space, in time, and made of matter. So it can be all of those things.
remember, okay, so you remember what I said is that at the end of the day, there is a cumulative case that we're
Right.
making here. So
Yes.
if we were to come from the Kalam cosmological argument, which has set a precedent that this particular thing that brought forth the universe to exist ought to be spaceless, timeless, matterless, and all that kind of stuff,
Yep.
then we further then maybe call upon another argumentation to come and help us with the understanding of this particular thing that is spaceless, timeless, matterless, what, is it, could it possibly be necessary,
Well,
right?
right.
If
So,
this
so I just
argumentation,
want to clarify.
okay,
So, a
okay.
necessary thing doesn't need to be what created the universe. Like, for
Mm-hmm,
example, a necessary thing could be a potato, matter, time, and those could be
mm-hmm,
necessary things.
mm-hmm,
They exist in
mm-hmm,
all possible worlds. And so you could say a
mm-hmm.
necessary thing is a material thing just fine. You don't need the only kind of necessary thing to be the kind that created our universe. There could be other
No, no,
kinds of
no, no.
necessary
That's not
things.
that's not what I'm arguing. That's not what
Thank
I'm
you for the
arguing.
super chat, Richard.
What I'm
Appreciate it.
arguing is what I'm arguing is the cumulative case. What's it
Wait.
called?
I
Let me
just want to
call it.
clarify. So I'm saying that these two arguments aren't connected. They don't add anything to one another. Like you can say
No, no.
a potato is a necessary thing. Potatoes did not create the universe. Potatoes are still a necessary
Mm-hmm,
thing. So I can say that there's a potato inside of the only thing that exists in this universe is just a potato. It did not create a universe, but it's still a necessary thing. Now, if that's
mm-hmm.
possible, you can have a potato that's a necessary thing that didn't create the universe. What did create our universe is irrelevant. It doesn't matter because the potato is in the universe without, or in the world without a universe. So it doesn't matter whether or not the potato created the universe because the potato exists. It is a necessary thing independent of whether our universe is created.
You see, true. Just like we would say, just like numbers do exist necessarily, because in and of themselves, they maybe like we could argue that numbers also do exist necessarily, but we can't logically conceive of a world where numbers bring forth a universe. Because at the end of the day, we are not arguing necessity by virtue of the definition of what a necessary being ought to be. We're arguing that this particular necessary being brought forth the universe. So if you then, if you are to include the premise that what's it called, this particular subject, which is the universe, has an explanation in and of itself in a necessary being, we can't, this eliminates a lot of other speculations that you can argue, because you can't then argue a potato is what's it called, the explanation of the universe, if the potato in and of itself is part of the universe. You can't argue that it's an apple because an apple is part of the universe in and of itself. So maybe what we're suggesting, or what my proposal is, that that which we are attributing the character trait of necessity, right, ought to be that which exists out of the universe. I mean, not, we're attributing a certain thing, we're calling it necessary, right? And this particular thing, at the same time, we're also suggesting that this thing is within which we find the explanation
Okay,
of the
I
universe.
think you're following, but I think you missed what my objection was. So my objection with the
Okay.
potato is saying there is no such thing as a necessary being that exists in all possible worlds. It doesn't exist. It is a pure figment of human imagination that is false. So I can imagine a world with a potato that's a necessary being, and I can imagine a world with a god that's a necessary being, and those contradict. So if I have two different kinds of necessary beings that exist in all possible worlds, and they're both equally omnipotent, well, they can't both exist in the same world, so I now have a contradiction. So my argument here is that the idea of a necessary being is false because we can prove that there isn't such a thing since I can have two contradictory kinds of necessary beings. So if I can undermine the idea of a necessary being as you have defined it, then the whole argument fails. You can't use it as a cumulative case
I
now.
think, because remember we had like what's it called, what we'd call two definitions of necessity, if I may say, right? And necessity, that being that which has an explanation in and of itself, right?
Right.
That which finds an explanation in and of itself, and that which exists in all possible worlds, right? You can argue that there is potentially, you can imagine or conceive of a world where apples and necessary stuff, right? But that doesn't necessarily follow that apples have the existence, or rather the explanation of the existence in and of themselves, right? So what I'm arguing is that there is this particular necessary being, and it's necessary by virtue of the fact that it has the explanation of its own, the explanation of its existence in and of itself.
Right. So I agree
And
with what you
given
said
that this
before, where
particular,
you said
mm,
if I said an apple is necessary, and by definition that means it has an explanation in and of itself, and you said, well, you could just be wrong. Apples just don't. Like, yes, exactly. So just like you say God is necessary and has an explanation in and of himself, I could just be like, No, you're wrong. God is like apples. Neither of them do. So the fact that you assert something is a necessary being isn't evidence. You could just be wrong, just like apples. Saying apples is a necessary thing, well, you're just wrong. So if you say God is a necessary thing, you could just be wrong. So there's no evidence that either of these things are necessary. You're just asserting them. So the evidence that God is a necessary thing, the triomni God is a necessary thing, is exactly the same as the evidence that an apple is a necessary thing. The only evidence is that you've asserted it. That's it. And so the fact that the only evidence that exists is that you've asserted it means that they're on equal footing. God and apples have equal credibility of being the necessary thing, which is zero. They have zero credibility of being necessary things. They're just asserted.
But you see, at the end of the day, I like using the statement at the end of the day. So what we're drawing at is that if we're to because we made the assertion initially that not one argument, what's it called, would exclusively annihilate the possibility of there not being a God, right? Or there being a God in and of itself, right? But what we're stating is that if you're to have a case for contingency, it's an argument from contingency, right? And you say that we're assuming that this particular God, in whom the explanation of their own existence is within themselves, then we can then look into other argumentations that try to understand or try to what's it called, narrow down what the character traits of this particular idea of a god actually could have,
Right,
right?
right. I
So
agree with
now
that. But what I'm
we're
saying
looking
is
at,
that
yes.
your argument doesn't do that. The contingency argument does not do that. Or the what's it? Yeah, it is the contingency argument doesn't do that. It tells us nothing. It tells us absolutely nothing. It's an exact big zero with nothing, because there's no evidence of a necessary being having these properties. You're just making it up. I can make up and say an apple has a necessary property. Does that mean that that's evidence that apples created the universe? No. It doesn't matter if I add in the cosmological arguments, completely irrelevant. So if I can show that the entire contingency argument fails and it indicates nothing because necessary qualities are just made up by human minds, then the entire argument is a big fat zero, and it doesn't matter what else. You can add anything else you want to it. Zero times anything is zero. And so my argument here is that it doesn't matter what you add into the contingency argument. I can just show it's a zero. If I can show it's a zero, there's nothing you can possibly add to it to make it not zero. And so because there's no evidence that necessary qualities are real things and not just made up by human imagination, then it's a zero. And you can't add anything to it to change that. It's still going to be a zero.
Okay, so I think if I'm to get what you're trying to say, so you're simply arguing that there's no such things as necessary objects or necessary things within the
Yes.
universe.
Yes. As you have defined it, I
Okay,
think
so
your definition of necessary is
okay,
false.
so what would you define as what's your definition of a necessary thing, or what could potentially be a necessary thing, and what are some of the examples of necessary things
I would
that
say,
you would potentially give?
yeah, I'd say the foundation of any world is a necessary thing.
What does that mean?
Whatever is the fundamental thing that created all other things in a world is the necessary thing. So it could be a quantum field, it could be a god, it could be a magical pixie. Anything that created everything else in the universe is a necessary thing. So if it wasn't created, so if a non-created thing that created everything else in a particular world.
Okay, so does that then mean that what's it called? I think it takes us back to the point that I was making initially, right? If we were to maybe define, let's stick to that definition. If we were to define that anything that set everything in motion or anything that created everything ought to be a necessary being by that definition, then we ought to understand why is this particular necessary being, what's it called? Either God over the quantum field, or why is it the quantum field over God? Right?
Yep,
So at the end of the day, we've argued that this particular thing that set everything in motion is a necessary being, right?
sure.
And then we still are left with the possibility of this particular thing either being a god or a non-god,
Right.
or let's for this particular case being the quantum field or the God hypothesis,
Yep.
right? So at the end of the day, now we've attributed another quality to this particular probabilities, the two probabilities that we have.
Which
So
is
now
still
we're
zero.
arguing.
Still zero evidence.
No, we say, no, we're coming there. We're coming there. So at the end of the day, we've ruled out all other things that are not necessary. In this particular context, if you add the contingency argument to the Kalam cosmological argument, we've excluded all things that are not necessary. We've excluded we've excluded all the things. Sorry, I got a message here. We've excluded all the things that are not necessary. We've excluded all of the things that the Kalam cosmological argument excludes from what it defines as the beginning of the universe, right? Now, then maybe we can proceed to the fine-tuning argument,
Well, again, the
right?
point here is that none of that
Mm,
matters. Like we can exclude lots of things. That's not evidence. Excluding things is not evidence. It's completely a waste of time. Like all of
no,
that
but
excluding is
if
irrelevant. Like I can
if
exclude
we're
round squares. Round squares
mm,
didn't create the universe. Have I added any
no,
evidence to any hypothesis? No. It's still zero.
no, but I think if you're to look at what's it called, the probability, if you're to look at it from the probability
The probability is
perspective,
still zero. It's
the
still zero.
more the more things no, the more things you eliminate,
It's
the
still
higher the
zero.
probability of that which is left.
No, it's still zero. So like if I have like let's say what knocked the cup over and I say, well, it wasn't the unicorns. Does that add probability that it was leprechauns? No, it's still zero. Does it add
It no
probability it's
potentially.
no.
I think that's where
No.
would no, I think that's where we'd disagree, right? That's where we'd disagree. Would disagree that if there was like five explanations of why something could possibly happen, and by means of evidence we eradicated one of the five, that is going to increase the probability that it was four.
No.
Because at the end of the day, the fifth possibility has been eliminated, and that leaves if there's probability of 100% that if let's say each of the five explanations has 25% chance that it brought about that particular outcome. If
That's
we eliminate one,
begging the question. So imagine there are 10 axles for car
mm,
axles.
mm,
Let's
mm,
say we
mm,
discover the first 9 axles are broken. Does that increase the probability that the 10th axle works?
more or less, if you haven't explored it. No,
No.
if you haven't explored it, the probability that it is the explanation of that is higher than those that you've already eradicated or
No. No.
eliminated. But
No.
it does though.
It's like if I said, let's say we have a jar and we're picking
Mm,
marbles out of the jar, and the first 5 marbles, we know there's 10 marbles. There's 10 marbles in the jar, and the first 5 are all red. And the 6th one is red, and the 7th one is red, and the 8th one is red. What is the probability that the 9th and 10th one are not red?
higher than when there were 10 marbles.
No.
But that's the thing.
like
That's the
like
thing. Let's assume, no. Let's assume there is two worlds, right?
that's a
There's two
gambler's
worlds where
fallacy.
all
This is a
no,
gambler's
no, no.
fallacy. So like
Okay,
I just want to explain
let's
this
look
for a
at it
minute.
this way.
Let's go back.
Let's
Let's
look
go
at it
back.
this way. Let's look at it.
I want
Okay, no, let's look at it this
I
way.
just want to explain this a little bit. So
Okay.
if we have 9 car axles, 10 car axles, there's 10 car axles, and we discover the first one's broken, and the second one's broken, and the third one's broken, and the fourth one's broken. This tells us nothing about the fifth one, the sixth one. They could also be broken. They're not. It's not more likely that they're not broken. They could all be broken. All of them, all 10 are broken. So the fact that the
But
first
remember,
9 are
no.
broken.
But at the end of the no, no, really, at the end of the what the premise that we started, if the premise that we started with is that one of these things is gonna be the explanation of the beginning of something,
Right.
it's like
That's
we're
the begging the
arguing.
question.
No. Wait, let's say if you're to look at the marbles example, right? There's 10 marbles in a jar, and so far we've collected 5 red marbles. Our first premise was that one of these marbles is yellow,
Right. That's begging
right?
the
That was our
question. You
first
can't
premise,
do that.
right?
You can't do that.
No,
That's
no, but
begging the question.
no,
We
so
could
but at
both
the end
be
of the day,
wrong. Both of our hypotheses could be wrong. So you can't say because we've eliminated round squares that it's evidence that one of ours is more likely to be right. We could just all be wrong. We could all just have broken axles. Thank you for the super chat, Charles. Appreciate it. So this is why the methodology you're using is fundamentally flawed here, is because you're saying one of the things we imagine must be correct. And so if we eliminate some of the things we imagine, then that increases the probability of the other things we imagine. No, it doesn't. It adds exactly nothing. It adds exactly zero evidence to any of the hypotheses. In order to have evidence of a hypothesis, you must have positive evidence of that hypothesis. Negative evidence of other hypotheses is never positive evidence of yours, ever, under any circumstances. So if I say, this phone did not create the universe, does that mean that's evidence of this cup? No. Still zero. In order to be evidence of this cup hypothesis must make predictions of some kind. So like simply
okay,
eliminating
so
other things
but
is
so
never
now
evidence.
but holistically, what we're suggesting, even in the context where we are both wrong, it still holistically increases the probability that that accurate explanation for that particular cause is more like the probability of that is actually increased. Because at the end of the day, we're looking at a world or a context within which, let me say, if there was such a thing as a fear of everything, all right, if there was a container where there was every particular possible explanation of this particular outcome. And one of the possibilities of, or rather, one of the explanations within this container is accurate, right? The more explanations that you get rid of, the higher the chances that that particular explanation that exists, or rather, that particular explanations or those explanations that are left behind, they had the possibility of them being more accurate. Because at the end of the day, maybe you're starting with a jar. I feel like if we have to look at this jar of marbles, we're looking at a jar of possible explanations for what we believe to be the universe, right? And we are then assuming, in as much as maybe our thought process or our understanding of whether they be a yellow marble in this jar is limited to only the 5 red marbles, right?
Well,
This particular
that's the
5 red
problem.
marbles.
That's the begging the
No,
question
so
that you
the thing is
can't
that,
do. My whole objection here is that your entire methodology fails because you're begging the question. You can't ever assume that you have the right answer. It's just not an option. You can never get evidence by eliminating other things. You can't do it. You need a positive reason for your claim. Don't ever waste time eliminating other things. I don't care. Give positive reasons of your claim. If I want evidence of general relativity, I say we can observe this curvature of space-time in gravitational waves. I don't need to eliminate other things. I don't have to waste any time eliminating other things. It's a complete waste of time. I can give one example of positive evidence for my claim, and you don't seem to be able to do that. So anytime you are eliminating other things, it's a zero. It's a waste of time, not evidence. I can just say that's not evidence. Give me some
no, no, but
evidence.
I think, no, no, but I think at the end of the day, remember at the end of the day, we're arguing concepts that are inaccessible via the methods that we currently have now, right? So the
Well,
best
no,
thing
the
that we
quantum
can do,
mechanics
no,
is
no,
like
no.
we can demonstrate quantum mechanics. That's accessible. We can test it.
Mhm. But that doesn't exclusively prove that the quantum mechanics is the explanation for the beginning of the universe, is but a possibility of the explanation of the universe,
Well, it's
right?
evidence.
So I
So it's
think,
evidence that this is right and everything else is wrong. So the fact that the quantum fields can make testable predictions and have been confirmed, that's evidence, that positive evidence that that one's right and everything else is wrong. God is wrong, leprechauns are wrong, fairies is wrong. Because it can make predictions, that's a piece of positive evidence that moves the probability that it's true up and everything else down. So
no, but see, I think because we at the end of the day aren't. I think I think what we fail to distinguish is where the distinction of our position actually is, right?
no,
Because
no,
at
I
the end of the
understand your
day, I
argument. Your
was.
argument is that even if the quantum fields have been demonstrated to be correct, well, that could be explained by God. But that doesn't matter. It's like if I say we're going to demonstrate that the wind knocked over the cup and nothing else exists, no leprechauns exist. The model is the wind did it and nothing else did it. And that model makes predictions and is shown to be correct. That's evidence of that model, and everything else gets no evidence. Everything else is a zero, everything else is wrong, everything else is off the table. So the fact that one model makes predictions and none of the others do, that one gets 100% of the evidence. Nothing else does. So the fact that you can add other things in is just not evidence. So the fact that the quantum fields make the predictions, it gets all the evidence. It has everything. There's no other theories that have any evidence. It's only the quantum fields. And adding in that, well, these could be explained by something else is never going to be evidence. It's just adding stuff to the hypothesis that's unnecessary.
Okay, so what are you necessarily arguing that the only forms of evidence that are relevant to the pursuit of knowledge is scientific evidence?
No. Thank you for the super chat, Jima. Dima Music. So I'm saying
Mm,
evidence is anything that can differentiate imagination from reality. That's what evidence is.
okay.
And novel testable predictions do that really well. Science works is a very good way to do that. If you have a different way
Good.
to do it, that's fine too. I don't really care what the method is, but it has to be able to differentiate imagination from reality to count as evidence. And what you've presented doesn't. It's just you're saying even if I eliminate a billion other possibilities, that'll never be evidence of mine. So like if I go present a scientific paper, I say the cause of, let's say, fire is phlogiston, and I say I eliminate things. It's not hydrogen, it's not nitrogen, it's not helium, it's not plutonium or uranium. No scientist is ever going to take me seriously. They're not going to be like, oh, you've eliminated enough things that we grant you're right. Never going to happen. You have to provide positive evidence of your case Negative evidence of other people's theories is literally never going to be evidence that your theory is right.
That's true. That's true. I do actually agree with that. I do agree with that statement. And I'm still what they called were proposing that if maybe remember in this particular context we are faced with a scenario where we don't have this scientific capacity to examine that which could have either brought forth or couldn't have brought forth this particular material world
Well,
that we're
I'm
looking
not
at.
sure.
We're
I'm
all
not
looking
sure
at
what you mean by that because we
okay
literally
in
do.
this what I'm talking about is that even if given that maybe by the scientific method the quantum field, or as you've made speculated, the quantum field brought forth the universe. That doesn't eliminate, or rather, that doesn't conclude that there is or there is no God,
Yes, it
right?
does. So it literally says this is the
Not
theory that's
necessarily.
right. Yes, it does. So in a scientific theory, you make a theory. This is caused by quantum
Mm,
mechanics. It's not caused by
mm,
God. And if this one makes
mm, mm,
testable
mm,
predictions,
mm.
it's evidence of the quantum mechanics and against God. It disproves God. If we have a theory that can explain it, that says there's no God, it's the quantum field, and that one gets the things right, that's evidence there's no God. Um,
That's where I beg to differ. I beg to differ. Giving an explanation of something doesn't eliminate what's it called? Let me put it this way: giving what's it called? Giving us a manuscript of how the Ford was put together doesn't eliminate the first idea or the first creator of the Ford car as we can currently see it. Yes, you have a very good explanation, or you have a very good, possibly scientific explanation of how to put Ford parts together and how they then function the way they do function, but you haven't by that explanation eradicated the guy that created the Ford car, right? Or the guy that came up with the idea that the Ford car ought to be designed this particular way. So you've explained the design, but by means of explaining the design, you haven't eradicated the designer, so to speak,
so
right?
does
So
does
we still have
does proving lightning is caused by friction in clouds disprove Thor?
not necessarily.
Right. But which one has more evidence?
I mean, the lightning has more evidence because going back to
Well,
the
lightning is
Ford
the
example
phenomenon.
that we
So
have,
so the question is
no, no, lightning is the phenomenon. Thor is maybe, let's
the
say, the god of
cause.
the phenomenon, right?
Right. So
Not
so
necessarily caused, right? Not necessarily. See now, where I want us to have the distinction is that instead of looking at it as a chain reaction where Thor causes lightning, right, and contrasting it with maybe the charges, positive charges causing the lightning,
right.
right? We are arguing that Thor is actually the god of this particular phenomenon that causes the lightning, right? So we are suggesting that there is the phenomenon that we can explain that brings about lightning, positive charges interacting, right? And we are also then concurrently arguing that Thor is the god of this particular phenomenon. What
Right,
does
right,
that
right.
mean?
So
Thor,
if somebody thought that Thor literally produced the lightning, they would be wrong, right?
definitely,
Right, right.
definitely.
And
So they
and
would
so
be wrong. But
if
the
they thought
idea
that
here,
Thor produced the friction in the clouds, they would be wrong, right?
no, no, no. The idea is that
No, no, I
Thor
understand.
set in motion.
I
Yeah, yeah,
understand
yeah,
what
yeah.
you're trying to say. Follow my argument here. So, if someone
Okay.
was like, someone believed that lightning was caused by Thor, they would be wrong, right?
In part.
So literally, I'm talking literally the Roman god. We don't believe in like. I'm assuming you're not a
I
polytheist,
understand. I
right?
understand. No, I'm not. I'm not
Right. So,
polytheist.
we have two hypotheses. The
Yeah.
scientist says lightning is caused by friction in the clouds. The Thor believer says Thor did it. Now, the scientist said if it's
Let's
caused by friction in the
let's create a third set of people because
okay.
I feel like you're restricting it to some Thor believers believing Thor by some magical words made the lightning happen, and also there's the scientific method of how lightning actually works, is rather restricting the analogy. Let's create a third analogy whereby Thor is the reason why lightning behaves the way it does. If you to then explain how lightning works, you still haven't eliminated why maybe it behaves that particular way and not the other way.
Okay, so the
So
question
the
here
argumentation is that Thor is the
is there
reason.
anybody who is rational today in believing that Thor causes lightning? Is that a rational belief?
No,
Why?
because we've eliminated. We're going back to the what's it called?
We haven't eliminated it. We have
Maybe
never
no.
disproven
We're
Thor.
going back to the. Remember, we're going back to the whole understanding of us eradicating
No, no,
the
you
possibility
can
of
never
other
eradicate.
explanations.
In science you can
No, no,
never
no.
ever eradicate anything. It's impossible to ever eradicate. You can never prove anything false. We've never proven Thor doesn't exist. It is
But
impossible.
isn't the black backbone of the scientific method falsification?
No. Falsification was disproven. It's one of the methods we try to use under very specific circumstances. So you can falsify something if you say, my theory is right only if we see this result at exactly this time, and if we don't see it, then my theory is wrong. That's the only way to falsify a theory. But you can never falsify something if you just change it a little bit. So you can say, oh, well, it wasn't feeling correct today. Then you've not falsified it. So it's literally impossible to falsify anything in science unless you provided a very specific hypothesis. So no, you can never falsify something. Like we haven't falsified the flat Earth. Maybe we're in the Matrix. You've seen the movie The Matrix.
Yeah, I have.
So we could be in the Matrix and the world is actually flat. So we haven't falsified that the world is flat. Just all of the evidence indicates the world is round. So we have positive evidence the world is round, and we've never falsified the world is flat, but we still reject it.
Bless you.
Thank you. So this is the same thing with any kind of a God hypothesis or any hypothesis. You never falsify the alternatives. It's a complete waste of time. We could always be in the Matrix, and there could always just be another way we just haven't tested yet. But what evidence is positive indications that it is round. That is good evidence. We'll never falsify that the world is not flat. We'll never prove we're not in the Matrix. We can't do it. But the fact that we can never falsify that doesn't mean it's evidence that it's the case. It doesn't mean it's rational to believe the world is flat, because all the evidence indicates it's round. Now you could say, well, all that evidence can be explained by the fact that we're in the Matrix and the Matrix designers wanted it to look round, but really outside of the Matrix, the world is completely flat. But is that evidence the world is flat? No. The fact that we haven't falsified it is not evidence for it. What is evidence is the fact that we observe and make testable predictions that if it's round, here's the things we can do to experiment and see that it is in fact round. So simply saying we haven't falsified that the world is flat is not evidence that the world is flat. We can still say, nope, they're wrong. Anybody who believes the world is flat is wrong. We don't need to falsify that. We just have to have positive evidence that it's round.
Okay, so I think because the question was of course in the world that we currently live in, nobody believes that there exists a Thor, right? But my argument was that even in this hypothetical that we're trying to assess, is that whether you can very well explain how lightning works, right? That doesn't eliminate that Thor could have created the phenomenon via which lightning works, right?
Right. So let's go back to the flat Earth example. If we say all of
Okay,
the evidence the world is round, does that eliminate the possibility the world is flat?
not necessarily.
Right. You don't need to. So it's even if it doesn't eliminate the possibility, we can still say anybody who believes the world is flat is crazy, right?
But then the probability of it being round is more onto the side of, I mean, the probability of the correct answer is in favor of it being round than it being flat. There is a
Yes.
possibility that it is this, right?
Yes.
And but the probability is increased onto that particular mechanism, right? But at the end of the day, the explanation of the Earth being round wasn't embedded in the Earth being flat. Because at the end of the day, I think we're not using a fair analogy. If we were to compare that particular analogy of the explanation of an outcome, right, the explanation as opposed to the reason behind an outcome, and then we use the flat Earth, round Earth explanation or example, I don't think that's a fair analysis of the presentation that I'm trying to make. I think the
I'm not.
presentation is that
I think it is because I think that when we say if somebody thinks the world is flat and then we discover we like go to space and see nope it's round and then they can say well that doesn't prove it's round because really it's just an illusion, we're in the Matrix, and so if we go outside the Matrix we'll discover it's flat. They can always make up an amended ad hoc way to make their theory fit the evidence. You can always explain all of the evidence by adding on an ad hoc amendum to make it fit. by like saying we're in the matrix, therefore the world is actually flat. And that seems to be the same thing as when you're adding in, well, maybe there was maybe some being had a reason to make quantum mechanics do this or whatever. That's exactly the same thing as the flat earther who says, well, maybe we're in the matrix, so maybe it's really flat. Now, in the same way that our evidence that the world is round eliminates the flat earth model, because it doesn't prove it false. Like maybe we're in the matrix, we can't prove that false, but all of the positive evidence the world is round is a good reason to reject that hypothesis. In the
But
exact
now
same
you
way,
see,
in the exact same way, the
okay,
positive evidence we have of quantum fields is a good reason to reject the God hypothesis. That's why most physicists are
but I think
atheists.
that's where I think there is the unfair analysis, right? In this particular example that you gave, the evidence that we have is rather eliminating of a flat Earth, not the matrix ideology, right? If remember,
Say
if
that
the
again?
reason of us perceiving, if the reason of us perceiving the Earth as round is because there is a certain matrix that makes us perceive of it as that way, right? In this particular matrix, all the evidence that we have access to is that the Earth is round. So it
Yes.
definitely is going to disprove a flat Earth, but it's not going to disprove the existence of a matrix, right? So now I'm then trying to um, explain that at the end of the day, the reason behind that which we perceive isn't eradicated by the explanation of that which we are perceiving, right? So you're explaining that maybe our perception of the earth being round, of course, it definitely will eliminate the earth being flat because those two theories are counter with each other, or rather they set up against each other. We have the possibility of the flat earth and the possibility of a non-flat earth, right? One of them is not the explanation of the other, right? One of them is not the reason of the other. They're simply counter theories that have been set apart against each other, right? And then these particular theories, one of them has evidence that supports it over the other. Then we say that the probability of the other theory is higher than that. But if we are to argue that the matrix is the reason why we're perceiving of a round Earth, the fact that you see that the Earth is round and you have evidence of the Earth being round doesn't eradicate the matrix theory. That's what I'm trying to draw.
Right. It doesn't eliminate the matrix theory, but it's still ridiculous to believe in the matrix. Like anybody who believes in the matrix is ridiculous. So the point here is that
But then on what basis would you then say that? Because now, I mean, when you say that, of course, I could agree with you because I wouldn't I wouldn't maybe want a world where everything is a matrix and I'm just like a computer, whatever the case may be, right? But on the basis that you then come to the understanding, or rather you come to distinguish whether the world is a matrix or not, it's not the same basis that you come to distinguish whether the earth be round or flat, right? At this lower level, you're arguing the earth is not flat because you have evidence of it being round. But the evidence of the earth being round doesn't eliminate the evidence of this being a matrix, right? Those are
right.
two different theories.
Right, right,
If
but
for
but
some
we
reason,
have
if for
lots of
some
evidence the world is round. We have no evidence we're in the matrix. So it's rational to believe the world is round and that we're not in the matrix. So if no evidence has been provided that we are in the matrix, then you can say there is nothing that supports that hypothesis. We can therefore reject it. Where we have lots of evidence the world is round, so we have lots of good reason to accept that hypothesis. So likewise, if we have lots of reason to accept the hypothesis the universe was created by quantum fields, and there's no evidence a God was there, then we can reject the God hypothesis. That is false. There is no God. There is no matrix because there's no evidence that has been presented for those things. And we can accept the hypotheses that do have evidence that the world is round, that the quantum fields created the universe, because both of those things have evidence. So until evidence is provided for the God or the matrix, then we can reject them and say they are false. They are imaginary. They are things in people's imagination and are not real. So we don't need to prove those things false. We just need to say, if you haven't provided evidence of those things, then it's rational to think they are false.
I, th- I think maybe that's where I would need to what's it called give further thought and analysis on that. But I wouldn't necessarily say that that then drives us to believe that maybe the matrix or the God hypothesis is false because we have evidence of how the matrix or the world works, right?
Well, right.
If
That's
you're to
what I said is that we can conclude they're false is because no evidence has been provided for them. So like everything starts as imaginary. It's an imagination thing, something somebody came up with in their imagination. And then, in order to be reasonable to believe it exists outside of people's imagination, you need evidence. Remember, I said evidence is that which
Good.
can differentiate imagination from reality. So we
Okay,
have a
so
reason to
okay,
believe that the world is round. That evidence has been provided to show that that is true, independent of our imagination. There is no evidence
okay.
that has been provided to show that the world is flat is true, independent of our imagination. Therefore, we're reasonable to accept the world is round and reject the world is flat because evidence has been provided for the world being round and no evidence has been provided for the world being flat. The world being round doesn't disprove that we're in the matrix. It doesn't disprove that the world is flat. But there's positive evidence to accept that that statement, the world is round, is true, independent of our imagination. And no positive evidence exists to accept the statement the world is flat is true, independent of our imagination. And the same thing would apply here to God and quantum fields. We have good reason to believe
So at
quantum
the end of the
fields.
day,
Go ahead.
so we've now ended up with the concept of, yeah, because I'm sorry, I'll be maybe we'll conclude in the discussion in the next 5 minutes because I had
Okay,
so much to go. But
sure.
anyways, so what we've ended up with is that we've we've come to the understanding that there is an explanation for how the world behaves, just like there is an explanation for how lightning behaves, right? We haven't then come to the conclusion. I think it won't be genuine for us to then draw the conclusion, maybe looking at the lightning hypothesis, right? We can't draw the conclusion that because we understand how lightning works, this therefore eliminates the reason or there being no reason that Thor created it in this particular way or said it in this particular way, right? We are left with the analysis that we understand how lightning works. We understand how the Ford car works. We understand how water in a kettle boils. We understand all of these things, right? And we simply have no evidence for the reason behind why these things behave the way they do. Because I was initially suggesting that there is no scientific evidence to measure reason, right? There is no scientific method that you can put in place to measure reason, right? The best thing you can do is maybe draw from the previous or past observations that the reasons that have been behind these particular events occurring have been this. So therefore, this particular event occurring possibly has a reason behind its occurrence, right? But there is no direct scientific method that you can maybe put reason in a test tube and say, I titrated 30 milliliters of reason for why this particular thing is the way it is, right? So at the end of the day, from your perspective, you're arguing that maybe we ought to, what's it called? Um, I think from what I understand from the atheism understanding of things is that there is no God behind all of this thing that's functioning. And the theist is arguing that there is a God. So both statements are more like statements of assertions, right? They both worldviews are asserting that they be or they be not God, right? And both sides are appealing to the naturalistic explanation of that to then suggest whether their side is much more favorable than the other side, right? And what we still end up with is there is an explanation for how things behave, but this explanation hasn't eradicated the possibility of that reason behind those things or there being no reason behind no things. So maybe the scientist would have to prove that all these things that are occurring, I mean, the atheist would have to prove that all these things that are occurring are consistently from the beginning to the end occurring randomly, and there is no some sort of mind behind it. And then they maybe the theist would have to prove that there is a mind behind all of these things and that's why they're behaving the way they're behaving. But at this stage of the conversation it seems as though both aisles of the analysis don't necessarily favor the other. We only end up with this explains how this works, but we aren't what's it called, we aren't coming to the conclusion that the explanation of this particular phenomenon is speaking more into things happening at random as opposed to things being set in motion to work that particular way.
Right, and to summarize my view is that to me it seems like you're like the flat earther who's saying, well, I mean, the fact that science shows the world is round, well, it doesn't have any way to measure the matrix. Science can't measure the matrix. It can't like measure 3 ounces of matrix to understand how it's looking, and really they just understand how the matrix is working. And so actually the world is flat outside of the matrix, and science can't measure the matrix, and therefore it's reasonable to believe the world is flat. And my position is like, no, that's completely irrational because there's no positive evidence of the matrix. There is positive evidence the world is round. It may not be able to differentiate whether or not we're in the matrix, but there's no positive evidence of the matrix. So we're rational to believe in the positive evidence the world is round, and irrational to believe in the matrix. And so I'd say the same is the case with God. We're rational to believe in quantum fields. It's irrational to believe that God caused the quantum fields, just like it's irrational to believe that a matrix caused the evidence that the world is round. And but yeah, if you said you have to go, do you want to give a shout out to where people can find your channel?
This has been very, very fruitful conversations, and the basis of my channel is actually to have more of these conversations. And I made a disclaimer. I'm pretty new to all these concepts of philosophy and whatnot. So thanks to Tom for actually opening up my mind to a lot of perspectives that I could have what's it called only experienced or come across on this particular day. And that also puts me in a place where there is need for further analysis of my position and further analysis of the evidence that um, probably does exist for my point of view and worldview. So thanks to TJump's viewers and all the people that have contributed to the existence of this channel. You can actually find me on Roundtable Apologetics. It's a very, very tiny channel that just actually started recently. And I hope that in the due course of the progression of my channel, you can see how I intellectually grow in the way I attempt to have these discourses that I'm having with the people like Tom and other people that I'll encounter. So thank you so much, Tom, for this opportunity. I love having these conversations, and you've actually broadened my mind because it was limited to a certain level of conversation and discourse, and it now causes me to improve on the way I approach this topic and how I understand all of these things, as I would call reality. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate you coming on. It was a real joy to talk with you. You're a lot better than a lot of the theists. So even though you've just started off, you're doing really, really well. And I want to congratulate you on your argumentation style. You're very intelligent in the way that you come across as arguments. And so keep going, and I think you'll do great.
Okay, thank you so much. Have a lovely night, everybody.
Thank you.
Great.
Talk to you later.
Sure.
You
Bye.
can just close the screen. I'm going to start the after show.
Okay.
You're still showing up, just so you know. You just close the window.
You say what?
You can just close the window. It'll
Also, I
automatically end it.
can leave.
Yes,
I can
yes,
leave now.
yes.
Oh,
Because
okay. All right.
I'm
Thank
going
you
to
so
keep
much.
talking with the people of my audience.
Okay, so is it possible to have a portion of this discussion so that I can also put it on my channel just to
Yeah, absolutely.
present all
I'll
these
send you the
perspectives to my.
link. Yeah, I'll send you the link on mine, and you can copy it and edit it however you want.
Okay, no problem. Thank you so much.
Yep,
Have a lovely
anytime.
day.
Talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
All right. Anybody want to hang out in the after show? Thank you, Gordon Fiala. Appreciate it. Fiala? Gordon Fiala? Hey, Frank. Jeffrey phone.
Yeah, hello.
If anyone wants to call in to the TJump Discord and say stuff, or I guess I could post the whereby link if anybody wants to do whereby. If anyone wants to chat in the whereby, there's the whereby link. Do the Pine Creek thing. Open call in if anybody would like to call in to the TJump call in show.
Hey Tom.
Hey,
Hey Tom. So, what do you think about the whole Robert Price thing?
I watched part of it. I didn't see much that I thought was too irrational. He didn't seem bigoted to me. I was taken aback when he said he was a Trump supporter. I was like, whoa, what? Trump supporter, like, ouch. Hey, Jesse White, how's it going? Damn it. VP slash. What do you think, Frank?
I didn't watch it too. I didn't watch the entire thing, but I did hear he made some really weird comments
Like what?
on I don't know about race or something on Twitter, and so people were trying to deplatform him.
I went through the Pine Creek thing, part of it at least, and all the ones I saw, I didn't see them were too bigoted. I didn't think any of them were bigoted, but didn't go through the whole thing. AANA literature from an epistemological. The what? I don't know what that means. Fenton Mully, TJump should check out the AA/NA literature from an epistemological perspective. I don't know. I have no idea what that means. Jesse White, TJump, I remember I asked once before if you were an anti-theist and you said no. I have a poor memory, so I forgot the reason, but fact that all religions use fallacies and manipulation. No, I'm not anti-theist. Like, I think that you should believe what makes you happy, and religion makes a lot of people happy, and that's why I'm not anti-religion or an anti-theist. Frank, you got a lot of background noise.
Fix your mic, man.
Price came on Pine Creek because he had made some racist remarks. I didn't see any of the racist remarks. Like, I didn't see, of the ones that Pine Creek showed, any of them were racist.
So what'd you think of this guy?
I like this guy. You have a lot of background noise, Frank. We can hear a lot of stuff in the background.
I'm sorry, man.
But yeah, I liked this guy. This guy was nice. Smarter than a lot of the Darth Dawkins types. Pleasant to talk with. He was a good guy. Jar Jar, TJump, welcome to the Church of the Chair. Yep. Hey Lawson, how's it going?
Good. Oh, the AANA thing? I think they're talking about the Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous.
Ah, I was like, NA, assault? Is this a salt thing?
I used to do a lot of videos back in the day on AA and how it could be a lot better if they changed shit.
Yeah, I have not done much in that. I used to have a guy I knew, speed of sound, something, gravity, speed of sound of gravity or something like that. He was big into that. He said it did really well for him. So Alcoholics Anonymous has worked for many people apparently. So I don't have any objection there, but I never drink, so it's not my expertise.
Well, the problem with it is that they count success as someone staying in Alcoholics Anonymous as a member. And if somebody leaves and like goes back to drinking, they're not a member anymore, so they're not like counted in the failures.
Yeah, that would
like don't get me wrong. I think AA is really good for people. It's just their methodology on gauging stuff like that is super flawed.
Well, I mean, that just sounds like basic politics. I imagine that pretty much every single drug company does that too. That's why you need peer-reviewed things that are tested. Yo, TJump, do you think religious groups should have legal protection beyond just freedom of religion? Example, Islamophobia is covered under Ontario anti-racism. I don't think so, because I don't think being an asshole should be illegal. So people should be able to be an asshole, and that's different from like being bigoted against a group or whatever. Like, as long as you don't, I mean, I think that the crime of like harassment is enough. What?
Are you listening to me?
Yes.
Thanks, bro.
Scott McDonald, one of these days I'm going to drive over to Minnesota just to buy TJump a beer, mostly because I'll be able to drink it for him. That's right, because I don't drink.
Tom, I'm taking you out for some beers one of these days, man.
Sure. I'll probably get like a cherry Coke. That's my thing. Jipperson Price said that black protesters deserve to get shot and praised the January 6th insurrection and hoped on a civil war. I don't think I got to the January 6th part. I heard, like, he said that they were he used a word, thugs, but that's not about black people. Like, I think he said thugs deserve to get shot in that case, which is harsh, but I don't think that's bigoted. Jesse White, TJump, what's your opinion on David Wood's backstory? It is interesting because he uses his violent assault against his father as justification for his atheism being like similar to sociopathy. Yeah, I mean, psychopaths and sociopaths are very similar. And he says that, yes, when you're an atheist, you don't have an objective moral basis. And that's sort of the case. That if you don't have because atheism doesn't say anything about there being an objective moral basis. So if you don't have an objective moral basis and you're a psychopath, you're more likely to do things than if you do have an objective moral basis and you're a psychopath. So I think his story is definitely true and probably sort of justified. Thank you, Padawan Fef. Appreciate it. For the cherry Coke. That's an expensive cherry Coke.
Very expensive cherry Coke.
Hey, Padawan, if I started a YouTube channel, will you send me super chats?
No, you're not TJump.
Exclusively TJump.
Exclusively TJump. Sorry, Frank. I don't support Sims. Love you though, Frank.
Our dying son, you are already pretty much hated, TJump. Price knows the Bible stuff. He said some pretty awful stuff. None of that makes sense.
And she would like pink it or something? Oh.
My hair is pink. What are you talking about?
Yo, what's up?
Hey.
TJump, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you please repeat your moral framework and how does it work?
Law of physics. Morality is a higher order emergent property, a product of minds and interactions in physical universe. I think it's involuntary imposition of will is immoral, is like the principle.
So are there objective moral facts?
Yes. What objective morality means.
How can you recognize what's a moral fact that's objective?
We use our intuitions. If there is an objective fact that affects our intuitions, then our intuitions are how we can try to assess them.
So you think intuitions is a good tool to get to truth?
No.
To a fact?
No, but it's a good way to build a hypothesis, though.
But then these facts can be wrong, right? Because they are based off intuitions.
Anything can be wrong. Like the only absolute certainty we have is I think, therefore I am. Like, obviously, it could be wrong.
Mm-hmm. So you are not too sure exactly if these facts are objective.
Right. It's a hypothesis that makes predictions. So only after the predictions were or discovered to be true, then we would have good reason to think it's true.
You said something about the will, imposition of will.
What? Yes.
How does that work? Is that the only thing that you use to get to moral facts, or?
Well, that's the principle that describes the moral facts. It's not how you get to them. Hey, Stupid Energy, how's it going? Long time no see. Scientists do know how lightning works. Shut up.
So, it could, in your moral framework, what would lying be moral?
No, lying would not be moral or immoral. Lying is amoral unless you're under like a contract not to lie.
Okay, so lying is moral.
No, it's amoral. It's not moral or amoral.
All right.
When you say amoral, what do you mean with
Not moral and not immoral, like picking up a rock. It's neither good nor bad.
Mm-hmm. What about being a gluttonous?
No, food is not immoral.
Yeah, but being self-absorbed, for example.
No, not immoral.
What about being prideful?
Nope, not immoral.
What about having sex with animals?
Animals don't have the intellectual ability to consent, so that is immoral because they are not intellectually capable of consenting. Once they have the same intellect as humans, then it would not be immoral.
But killing them
Also
is
immoral.
also immoral?
Yes, killing them is immoral.
So you're a vegan?
Nope.
So you're not consistent with your worldview?
No, I'm very consistent. I'm just immoral. Knowing what is truth and acting on it are separate things. Anybody else got any questions?
Do you believe in infinite recession?
Infinite recession? You mean like in the universe?
Infinite regression, yes.
It's a possibility, yes. It tends to be the one most favored in physics.
Right. Well, do you favor it as an idea?
Yes, I think it's perfectly reasonable and rational. I usually take the necessary one because it's the easiest one to argue in theists, but the infinite regress is probably the best one. Most consistent with physics.
Okay.
Jesse White, 2 quick questions. What inspired you to be a strong debater against theology, and are you a fan of R and Ra? I started my YouTube channel and started debating as a way to promote my epistemology and model of morality. That's what inspired me to be a debater. And I am a fan of R and Ra when it comes to biology, for sure. Biology and evolution, he's very good. Philosophy, not so great. Thelemic magic. TJump, what's your benchmark for justifying an immoral action? If it's an involuntary imposition of will, it's an immoral action. Yeah, that was a flurf. The 5G booth guy was a flat earther who hangs out around one of the lakes around my house. That's where I met that guy.
TJump?
Yeah.
If I'm our dying son, hello to all, by the way. If Bob Price is not a bigot, what is he?
I don't think bigot has like an opposite. It's just bigot or not bigot. So if he's not a bigot, he would be a not bigot. But I don't know any. I didn't see anything bigoted in the part of the video I watched, so I don't know. I have no reason to think he is.
Would you agree that he said or might said pretty awful things?
I don't know, like what?
I mean, like shooting rioters on spot because they're rioters.
With pepper spray, or did he say like with literal bullets, or just pepper spray? Because pepper spray, like I don't see really a big deal with that.
I don't think you can shoot with pepper spray, but you can shoot with bullets.
No, like you
He
can
said
shoot.
shooting.
Pepper spray is in capsules that are in bullets. They are literally pepper spray bullets. There are lots of non-lethal kinds of bullets. I don't think he meant literally shoot them to kill them. I don't think he meant that. I think he meant with pepper spray and spray canisters. Which
okay, I think you're pretty semantics in this. But anyway, he also said that the insurrection on 6th of January was a patriotic act, but the rioters were thugs. So
yeah, I think that's the weird Republican view is that
I'm over here.
The weird Republican view is that there was a false flag or something, I think is the term, where it was not orchestrated by like Trump or his supporters, but by liberals or something. I think it's ridiculous.
He said that, yeah. He said that as well, yeah.
So I mean, like, that would make sense why he thinks they're thugs and also not Republicans. But
no, I don't have the Swiffer. I did it by hand.
Yes, Swiffer is good.
Can I ask, what exactly was his? Was it a tweet he made or something?
No, he posted on his blog.
Which corners?
Beth, I can hear you cleaning. So he posted an intro to a book where he was complaining against feminism and pronouns and stuff, and he wrote several articles. So it wasn't just like a tweet; it was a bunch of different things that Pine Creek brought up.
Why does all old, white, bearded old people are complaining about feminism? What's wrong with this world?
Well, I complain about feminism too. I think there's a lot of stupid arguments in feminism. Brian Stevens says he said he thought rioters should be killed, even kids. Like, if he said that, I would disagree with it, but I didn't see that part. I didn't see him say that.
Well, I think you should watch the video first, and then you can make some remarks.
I watched like the first half of it, so.
But I just took it back to this corner.
Fef, I can hear you cleaning. Fef, we can hear you cleaning the room. Lots of background cleaning and Swiffer and vacuuming.
Oh shit! What the heck? I didn't even know anything was. I'm at work.
Make sure you get the corners.
Look up Blossom.
There are rioters that are thugs that steal and rob places.
Well, thug is just anybody who does any violent crime. That's what thug means. It's a violent crime.
Yes, so I don't see a problem with him saying they are thugs.
Me neither.
Was Tupac a thug?
Probably. I think he was a criminal.
Was it? Huh.
This kind of parallels the tweet that Destiny made that got him in a lot of trouble.
What was that?
He said that the riots need to stop, and that if that means some right-wing guys mow down some dipshit rioters, then so be it.
Murder is bad. Don't shoot people. That is the correct answer here. Yeah. I'm not for killing anybody, especially not rioters. No, murder is bad.
What's the difference between rioters and protesters?
Yeah, there is an important distinction there, I would say.
Oh yeah, I guess that is an important distinction. So rioters are people who are like damaging public property, and it's justified to shoot them in self-defense of your property in many states, the stand your ground laws. So in that case, sort of.
But a drunk driver can damage public property as well, isn't it?
Yeah, in Texas, it's legal to shoot drunk drivers.
they're barreling toward
That's
my
a good
business,
wall.
you know.
Hey, TJump.
Yeah.
You know the singular of dice is die, right?
Yeah, but it's not as easy to understand in a sentence.
Gotcha. Oh, have you looked at LegalZoom for the church?
LegalZoom.
Yeah, check it out. LegalZoom.
I mean,
It's cheap.
I don't know if that would help. So I was talking to some bigger firms because what I'm trying to do is more complicated. When I want to start the apartment building, it's like getting the IRS to approve that is more difficult. Like just starting a church is easy. Anybody can do that online. It doesn't take much time. But getting a church and having the ability to start a business that is very similar to a for-profit business and get tax exemption is very difficult. That's the part that I'm looking into.
Gotcha. Well, you're ready to open up in California. I'll do your books and stuff. I'm an accountant.
Let's do it.
Where would it be located?
Everywhere. It's going to be an international. I'm probably going to open it in Delaware or Idaho. One of those states is the easiest to get it started, and then you can just put them everywhere. Get cross-state approval. Just put one in every state.
Tom, if you end up actually building these facilities and not just buying new ones, hit me up if you need someone to roof it for you. I'll do it for free.
Cool. That'd be great.
I'll even
Hey,
pay for
TJump,
materials.
how much?
Your tax write-off.
Nice.
How much does it pay you for 30 minutes?
What?
Sorry. $25.
How much does it pay you for 30?
It's like $50 for an hour on average, so just cut that in half and it'd be $40.
How about banning corporate ownership of all residential property? Would you do that?
Ban corporate ownership of residential property? You mean apartment buildings?
Yeah. Any and all, yeah.
No.
Just to drive down the housing prices.
No, I would provide alternatives that do it better. So I would want to buy
there we go.
apartment
We got a
buildings.
debate.
I would want to buy apartment
right.
buildings and then lower the cost to show that it can be done better to provide a moral framework, and then the news will pick up on that and say, oh, these people are doing it without this extravagant prices, and to show that that is possible will then give you a lot more funding and donations, which you can buy more and expand the business. So I would do it in the private sector, not try to outlaw it.
You're gonna lower the building cost or the maintenance cost?
Neither. I'm going to lower the rent.
What cost are you gonna lower?
None. The rent. So I'm going to charge people less money.
All costs will be lower due to being net of tax too, because it's a nonprofit.
Well, yeah, but I don't really want to focus on that because I want this to be a standard that private companies can also meet. And so the goal would be to just not pay myself as much money. I'm not going to pay myself $1 million a year. Problem solved.
Yeah,
and like
that was Jeff Bezos said.
Most people, like rent prices are determined by the desirability of the neighborhood, and so they just jack up rent prices because they can. There's no added costs. The building doesn't cost more because more people want to live there. They just jack up cost because they can.
But aren't you gotta you will mortgage the building, isn't it?
Mortgage the building. I'm going to buy the building.
No, you're gonna buy the building. Where are you gonna go? Where are you going to get $2 million to buy the building?
I'm going to 4 to 10 million. So it'll be more than that. Donations, sponsors, angel investors.
You're gonna take $10 million in donations and sponsors.
Yes.
Wouldn't that be easier to mortgage it?
Maybe. I mean, either one would work, I guess. It's not really a big deal. I don't like mortgaging. I don't like debt for any reason. But
yeah,
depends what the options are. Once I get a sufficient amount of funding to be able to pay off the mortgage, then I will consider that.
That's why I'm saying, because the rent prices are marked by the mortgage prices. So in order to make a profit, you'll have to rent above the mortgage score price.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like if I pay for a mortgage, which then I have to pay off, then I'd have to charge enough to be able to make back the mortgage payments. Sure. Should we grow weed in the basement? In all the states where that's legal, yes. Probably not the basement, though. Probably grow it on the roof. Do vertical farming.
Isn't weed overrated in 2022?
I don't think so. If people like it, like, I don't get anything from it.
But
You don't get
people like
high?
it, whatever. So you can get high in any ways, not only weed.
Well, weed is cheap
it's such
and
a
easy. It's pretty.
yeah.
I don't think it's overhyped.
It's easy and very
commercial.
tolerable. It's one of the more tolerable drugs.
And you
It's
can't
easy,
overdose
it's easy
on
to
it,
get,
so there's no
have a good
overdosing.
night on it, without like wrecking your next day or whatever.
Yeah, the no overdosing thing is huge. So it's easy to grow. It's inexpensive. It doesn't kill you. So there are a lot of benefits to weed. It's a pretty amazing drug. Yo asked, so the point is to break even, or will you make money so that you can keep investing? I would definitely be making money, especially since taxes on a building. So a 50 something apartment building costs about $4 to $10 million, and taxes is about a minimum of like $400,000 a year in Minnesota. So I'd be able to make a significant amount. I'd still be able to make the average of a director of a nonprofit, which is $200,000 a year, which is ridiculous. It's way more than what I need.
Yeah.
And I can just invest that back into buying another one.
Nancy, get here. He said he.
So what's charitable? What is charitable in this endeavor?
The fact that we're lowering the costs for people as much as possible.
The cost to what? The cost to have a house?
Tenants, so they'd be renting apartments, or I guess we could do like housing too. But
The teenage life needs mostly.
We can hear you cleaning again, Faf.
You could set it as like a percentage or something like that. So you're gaining maybe a percent, and set that it's always lower than what the average is, than what most people owning houses are gaining.
Well, I'm going to set it to like at least like 50%. So you're going to be charged half as much to have rent in one of these places. That's the charitable part.
Yeah, that's fair. It's just setting it as the difference between what people are making as money to. So you're showing you can get away with making half that much and still make a shit ton of money.
Oh yeah, you can lower it by a lot more than that. But starting off, it's better not to lower it too much, because you're going to need overhead coverage in case shit goes wrong, pipe breaks, and you need to fix it.
And you're going to need expansion costs as well. So you're going to want to increase the area that you're covering as well. So.
Oh, expansion cost, that's going to come, that's where the taxes come in. Since it's going to be tax-free, all of the tax-free stuff is going to go into investment into future buildings.
Okay.
Wouldn't you think that an orphanage would be more cheaper?
Yes, but I don't want an orphanage. Why would I want an orphanage?
To grow the future TJumps.
That sounds miserable. I want to start a school. I don't want an orphanage. Screw that. Kids suck.
Yeah. Mr. Cerebro.
Now if we could do a mutant X kind of a thing where we can like experiment on them and give them superpowers, now that could be profitable.
Investing in properties that people are buying who are in the atheist cause, quote unquote atheist cause, who just happen to be atheists, I suppose. Not necessarily have to be, but know that atheists can do this, supports that cause, that shows that this is a
Would it be atheist or secular?
Atheist. It's going to be the atheist church, but anybody can join. So anybody's going to be able to live there, Christians, Muslims, whatever.
But it'd be the atheist
Is there a difference?
Sort of thing.
What makes a rent-based model better?
A rent-based model better than what?
Better than eliminating, like somebody asked earlier about banning corporate ownership of residential properties, which I would consider an ownership-based model, where you're trying to drive down the costs of owning a residence. by eliminating rent.
Well, one
Why
requires
is
you
rent
to.
better?
Well, one requires you to like run the government, and actually win over senators and things, and get things passed in the government, which is essentially impossible. And one just requires you to buy a building and lower the costs. So one is significantly easier than the other one.
Okay, so utilitarian reason is not philosophical.
Yeah, like I wouldn't be philosophically against that necessarily. I probably would for capital reasons. I'd have to research it more, but the reason I would choose the rent one is because it's a lot more reasonable to buy a building and set an example than it is to get elected into politics and change politics.
Totally agree. All right, thanks.
Yep.
TJump, there's this person in general that's asking a question for you.
What's the question?
Why the human being created the religions and he know that it is fake?
Well, they didn't. Most of the religions were created by schizophrenics. You can see the lecture by Stanford professor Robert Sapolsky on how epileptics and schizophrenics created religions.
Yes.
All right. Yes. Second question he asked is, why not just kill ourselves and after that there's no problems?
Well, the not being alive is one of the problems.
3 questions, man.
Like I like being alive. Recently, I'm slightly depressed right now, but the past 6 months were really happy. So I don't want to kill myself. I like solving the problems, like playing a video game. Like, why don't we just stop playing the video game? Because it's fun.
And then he asked, why all atheists preach atheism and do you believe in something can't hurt them?
What?
I don't. He's got limited English, but
he might be saying, why does religion, if the God doesn't exist, that can't hurt them, which is obviously false. The religion can still hurt you even if the God doesn't exist.
Yeah, so atheists
doesn't hurt you.
Atheists support atheism because there are a bunch of religious people, and the religious people hurt you by making very silly religious laws. And so it's people want to denounce the God in a way to counteract the effects of the religious people who believe in the God.
Exactly. Beliefs informs actions, and actions can be harmful based on what beliefs you have. And I shut down the conversation. I'm a conversation stopper.
yeah, I'm waiting on him to finish typing. He said, if we fix those problems in the religions, maybe it is okay.
Yeah, like no one is arguing against Jainism. There's not like atheists who are like debating Jains about how terrible Jainism is, because Jainism is super peaceful. That's why you don't hear anything about the super peaceful religions. No atheists are complaining about it.
Yeah, but they're not mainstream. They don't go on TV.
They would go mainstream if they were doing things wrong.
You don't hear atheists arguing against Buddhism either, like, or the super pacifistic versions of Hinduism. Like, you just don't see it happening because they don't do anything. They don't cause any damages. You don't see atheists debating sheiks ever because they're super pacifistic. So the super pacifist religions that don't do any harm, you don't see much fight back against because there's nothing really to complain about. Like, atheist problem isn't that you believe in something that doesn't have any evidence. It's that when you believe and you start passing laws that hurt people, that's the problem. They don't care if you believe in a God.
Della says, peace is not in every situation. There is violence and peace. Whoa. Pretty spooky, Della.
So peace is a result of violence. That's what he means.
He said no. He's just saying peace is not in every situation. There is violence and peace.
Maybe he means like
it's not possible.
Best for every situation. Like, I'd say no, peace is best for every situation, except for like self-defense. Question: since I heard you audited classes, do you think a degree is required in a world where you can learn everything online? No, most of the degrees are a complete waste of money. But it's probabilistically a good idea to get a degree if you want to have a higher paid job in America. Is it required? No. Most of the stuff you learn with your degrees are complete garbage and a waste of time.
Would you think it would be necessary for a degree if it would be free?
No. Most of the learning you do is on the job. You're trained on the job even after you get a degree, and most people can be trained on the job without the degree, except in very specialized fields like quantum mechanics or statistics, super complicated statistics, or aerospace engineering. Like, you need a degree for that kind of stuff.
So you need a degree to do stuff. You don't need a degree to know stuff.
Well, most jobs in America do not require a degree. Some jobs in America do require a degree, like aerospace engineering. Aerospace engineering requires a significant amount of mathematical knowledge and calculations and physical calculations and air turbulence and friction calculations and all that kind of stuff. So those require a degree, but most jobs don't. Most jobs you can just learn on the job and have no degree and you'll be fine.
Yeah,
But in
theoretically,
order,
there's a lot of jobs you can grow from. So you could have a base level knowledge and you can grow up positions in. Like I work in IT and you could like go entry level, help desk level to like my sort of role, which is I'm almost like a firefighter level where you like they throw you at lots of different job roles because you've been in lots of different job roles in IT. So you just support lots of different things and except for networking, I can do pretty much everything these days. I look
Yeah,
after phones even these days, sort of thing.
programming is getting so much easier because of the way they're doing the programming languages. You can probably just throw somebody in with no experience and just teach them.
Yeah, you throw a book at them that says these are the things that you're meant to tell the program to do.
Yeah, I really like the method I want to do is use the Zim, the Cronus Zen. It's a thing you plug into your PlayStation and Xbox, and you can program your controller to do inputs whenever you want. And this is the best way to teach kids how to do programming because there's a productive usage of the programming. They're getting better at the video game because they're good at programming. You can do all kinds of crazy shit like aim drop, auto fire, auto run, auto reload, all kinds of stuff. Auto aim.
but
Stella has 2 more questions.
Sure.
All right. So he asked, "Why are we here?"
Happiness, to
And
discover
5,
your
what is
purpose.
our goal in life?
Both the same thing. To find happiness.
what is happiness?
A feeling in the brain. Javier Jara, Tom, this is absurd. Why can't I get a job at CERN? You can get a job at CERN as a janitor.
Yeah, you can. But maximizing happiness, isn't that an absurd thing?
Yes, you're not supposed to maximize happiness. It's maximizing desires or will achievement. So like I desire to play a video game doesn't mean I'm going to maximize my happiness by unlocking all the skills immediately. I'm going to do that slowly and work my way through it. So I'm not maximizing happiness. I am maximizing desire to play the video game.
But would you say that you are happier in that instance than in other instances?
No, like video games can be very, very hard.
Happiness was maximized.
No, because like video games can be very, very hard. I can be very unhappy in a video game, but I'm maximizing my desire to play the video game, which can be unpleasant and not fun.
Wordle makes me angry. It makes me like frustrated to play.
That's because you don't have enough vocabulary.
No, it's just that like there's this one time I was limited to like 3 letters and I had no idea what to do. But anyway, it was fun.
It can be both the journey and the goal, or either.
No, it's always just the journey.
Do I have to be Catholic to get married at a Catholic basilica?
Depends. Like you could just tell them you're Catholic and therefore you could lie to them and so you could technically do it.
Because I was like talking hypotheticals with my boyfriend. He'll end up wanting to get married, and he wanted to get married at the National Basilica.
Is that a big church?
Yeah.
Is that an old church?
It's very old. Look up National Basilica.
I would imagine you can rent out the facility and have a secular pastor give the wedding?
I think he wants
The
the
real
whole
question is, are
Catholic
you ready
thing.
for the Catholic hell?
I think he wants the whole Catholic wedding shebang because he's a Catholic.
They might just ask you
What
to
does it?
show up for a few
TJump,
Catholic
can the
things
happiness
beforehand.
hurt you?
Can
What?
happiness hurt you? Sort of, yes.
Like when you're so happy that you cry? That's what you mean?
More like happiness can make you complacent to prevent you from becoming more happy, or happiness can lead you to something that can cause you pain.
I mean, you're when you're so happy that you don't recognize the domestic abuse from your partner.
Yeah, that'd be one example.
Have you ever been so happy that like your cheeks hurt, like after how much you've been smiling?
That's after laughter.
Yeah.
Like he laughs once and it hurts because he just never does it so often.
Yeah.
I have done that, but it was never because I was happy. It was because I was faking it for too long.
Oh my God! Wait, that happened when I worked in customer service.
I can empathize with that.
TJump, so this is fake happiness when it hurt you. So what is the real happiness?
It's Zen. When you're Zen.
No, Zen is garbage. Zen is garbage. So happiness, I think, is the pursuit of your desires. It doesn't need to be like ecstasy where you're completely dopamine up and you can feel nothing but pleasure. I think happiness is more like desire fulfillment. Like I want to play a video game, even if it's unpleasant at times because I'm losing. I still consider that happiness because I'm achieving my goals.
So you equate happiness with the desire to accomplish something.
Yes, working towards desires.
Working towards desire is happiness.
Yes.
And once you accomplish that something, what does that be being called? That's a lot of words, but you know what I mean.
Also happiness.
Isn't that happiness plus?
No, they're both
I think
happiness.
happiness and fulfillment might be slightly different.
I was going to say fulfillment of will. Wouldn't that be your
Well, no,
moral?
because like I'd say fulfillment, playing the game is also fulfillment. It's fulfilling to play the game, not necessarily. It's also fulfilling to win, but playing the game is also fulfilling. Making progress is fulfilling.
Yeah, and that's the same thing I said earlier
I
to you.
think personal fulfillment is something more like personalized to yourself, though. Like you can do small things that make you happy here and there, but you don't really feel fulfilled doing it. It
Like
can still
porn?
make you happy, like a lollipop or a joke you hear, but that's not really fulfilling. Fulfilling comes from long-term goals.
Never experienced that.
Well, I would say you could be fulfilled either during the process, at the end of the process, or both of the process and the goal.
Yeah.
Isn't that ambiguous?
Sort of, but that's not a problem. Like what you feel fulfilled by is subjective, so of course it's going to be ambiguous.
So we have no idea what happiness is. That's what you mean.
No, happiness is a feeling. It's whatever you want the feeling to be, essentially. What the feelings you desire to have.
Well, I can desire many things and never fulfill them.
Yes, so the feelings you desire to have, if you get them, that would technically be happiness. But I really don't care about happiness. I care about no involuntary imposition of will. So I don't whether or not it makes you happy, it's fine. Like you can will things that make you unhappy, and that's still moral.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I will a lot of immoral things. That makes me happy.
Well, I mean, like I can will to play a very hard video game, which is very frustrating, but that makes me unhappy at one point in time, but the entire process is a pleasurable process. So you can will to do something that makes you unhappy and causes you pain, but the pain itself is something that you desired.
And that is interesting. Pain can be
This
happiness
is called the
at some
challenge.
point.
Yes, it's called what is it? Masochism.
Yeah,
Challenge,
S&M.
challenge.
So pain is a brain state, and happiness is a brain state, and when they are interconnected, they become the same.
Yep. See you later, Thelemic Magic.
Alligator. In a while.
Alligator? What?
I hate to change the subject, but sorry. Can I ask a question, TJump? I hate to change the subject.
Sure.
Yes, please.
I found myself in the unfortunate situation of debating with a theist yesterday, and the topic of free will came up. And I agree with your position on free will that there is no free will because we either make a choice for reasons or we make a choice randomly.
Yep.
But this guy was. Do I have that right?
Yep.
So this guy was saying that
for reasons or for no reasons, which is random, but yeah.
Yeah, no reasons is random, right?
Yep.
Because this guy was saying that randomness can be a reason to do something.
That's stupid.
Isn't that stupid?
Well, it depends on how you define randomness. Like, if you define randomness as like some force in physics, then technically it could be a reason. That's why I normally say either you do something for reasons, in which case it's determined, or you do it for no reasons, and then in which case it's random. So you define that as random, and then it becomes ridiculous. But if you just say it's either done for reasons or it's random, because you haven't defined randomness, it's harder to say that. That's why I say it's either done for reasons or done for no reasons, and then define that as random.
Right. Yeah. So you equate no reasons with random right away. Right. I got you.
Because you can't name a random thing. Otherwise, it wouldn't be random.
Randomness. I just did it. Ha!
No. Can you tell me a random thing that you can do it now?
Well, randomness is a thing, and it is random. Because it's a noun.
I suppose you could say that something happened, I suppose you could say after the fact that something happened randomly.
Yeah, in physics,
but that's not the same thing.
Randomness is considered a fundamental force in physics. It's actually a thing. Like, randomness is really a thing in physics.
Yeah. So this theist was okay. He was a douche.
Does the randomness occur at the macro level or only at the micro level?
What's macro level?
It kind of depends. Like, it can happen at the macro level. It's just so unlikely. Like, the hypothesis is that the Big Bang was an example of this happening at the macro level.
Yeah. I feel like it is one of those sort of we're not 100% sure sort of things. But
we're not 100% sure about anything.
Oh, of course, we're not 100% sure about it, but it's something to bring up because it's sort of awkward to say it.
Yo, could you expand on how you get from I do things for reasons to free will isn't true? So, like, if you're determined to pick chocolate ice cream because the reasons in your brain cause the electrical signals to make you go for chocolate ice cream, then there's no choice in the matter. You're determined by the reasons, forced by them to choose chocolate ice cream. So if you do things for reasons and those reasons cause electrical signals that determine you to do those things, then you really don't have a choice. They're determined by the reasons.
TJump, I have a question. So, you have said that the happiness it is the best thing ever in the life. So you can in this life you can do everything you want for happiness. For example, killing people or doing something not good just for happiness.
It would be immoral to do that, but some people do that.
But what do you think about this?
It's immoral, bad, don't do it, it's immoral. Like, I
As
don't
long
think
as the people he
happiness
wanted to kill.
happiness isn't the most moral thing. The most moral thing is a world where it's impossible to force anyone to do anything they don't consent to doing. That is the perfectly moral world. So that would be the best thing. Would be that world, not happiness.
But how can we imagine such a world?
It's pretty easy. The Matrix.
The Matrix?
Yeah, like we can literally make the world like a world where it's impossible to force anyone to do anything they don't consent to doing. There's several different ways to achieve that. One would be is like put us in a computer like the Matrix where you can just be untouchable if you don't want to.
Yes, but isn't the humans or who we are, isn't us made by the interactions of other humans and presumably
Well, you can still have
not
that.
wanted interactions?
You can still have those. So like you can still interact with people and you can still choose to play a video game where you can get shot or killed or whatever. You could choose to go to a world exactly like this one where you can have anything happen to you. Like the only
Yeah, but
difference is it would be consensual.
if I would choose a world when where I can choose everything I want, would I be still human
Yes.
as I am now?
Sure. I mean, a human is mostly biology, not like what your
Yeah, but
decisions are.
how can I interact with the world that is on my knees?
Well, you would still
No.
be interacting with it. It would just be your own ownership, but other people would have their own worlds and you could go to theirs. You could make joint worlds. You could then again go to a world exactly like this one where you didn't have control over it. The fact that you have control over one world doesn't mean you have control over all of them.
Yeah, but probably what I'm asking is in this world I have access to progress, regardless of what other people think or do. I can progress myself. But in a world where everything is on my will, how can I progress myself? How can I be better?
You can limit yourself. So like you can make a video game that's hard and play the video game so you're limited. So if the world is under your control, you can limit yourself.
Yeah, but any game can be beaten because you will play it 100,000 times and you will get it once.
Sure, but you can set the rules of the game. You can say I can only play once.
Mm.
Like you could add a permadeath feature if you wanted to. I wouldn't, but you can if you wanted to.
I mean, options could be infinite, isn't it?
Sort of, yeah.
Would saying you don't want to be tricked get you a problem?
No.
Tricked?
You don't want to be allowed to be tricked. So someone could join your game and try and trick you.
It would just be physically impossible in your universe to trick you. You just know.
You'd know the answer.
Yep.
But they couldn't enter with knowledge that could trick you.
Wouldn't your universe...
Yeah, they
Sorry.
wouldn't be able to go into your world and trick you because you would know all of the facts in your world, essentially.
Oh, because I suppose the easiest way for that would be that you know what they know as soon as you enter the world. Yeah.
So you would have absolute knowledge in your universe.
If you wanted to, like if it's your universe.
Unless I didn't want.
Yeah,
How can I create a universe when I don't want absolute knowledge?
Like you have it on an iPad. If you have an iPad, has one of the options. Would you like absolute knowledge with this universe? Yes or no. Click no.
Yes, but that means someone else will create it for me.
Well, the iPad creates it, so like the iPad has all the power, but you don't need perfect knowledge to use the iPad. Like I can use my iPhone and I don't know how it works.
Yeah, you don't know how it works, but you can find out. I mean, it's not unreachable.
Sure, like you could choose to have all knowledge if you wanted to. You don't need to though.
I think there's sort of a conceptual problem there where they could already say trick you. In the one that I was thinking of, they could already be setting up something to trick you before you consented to whether or not they could trick you.
Well, so the way it would work is you have your own world and you get to set up all the rules in your own world and nobody else is in it. So if you say, in my world, it's impossible to trick me, and in their world, they can set up whatever they want, there's no way for them to breach the rules in their world and impart them into your world to violate your rules.
But if you don't have a rule either way, what occurs there?
Then they could do it either way. So like I have a universe where, is it possible to trick me? And I say yes, then it would be possible for them to do it. If I say no, then it would not be possible for them to do it.
But if you already have the universe that you exist in, and they are trying to trick you, but you don't know whether or not you've said whether or not they can trick you.
Well, what you know is irrelevant. Either you have or you have not. It is already set into the physics of the universe of whether or not this is possible. Whether or not you know it doesn't make a difference.
Okay, so you have to already set that parameter.
Yeah. Like you have a list of all the possible actions that can occur, and either it have to be an action can be done or cannot be done. It's got to be one of those two. And you could say, if you said, I don't know, it would just be can be done. Like you couldn't put it on a possibly could be done, but possibly could not be done. Or maybe you could randomize it. You could just put the universe, I'm going to put this on a random setting. Universe decide. Universe randomness setting decide.
Jesus, if falls into the water 50% of the time, every left step.
Yes.
That still is really difficult to. It has to be preset every step. Every configuration.
Well, not every configuration. Well, I mean, I guess if you want to do every configuration, but you just have a set of rules and say this action cannot occur, this action can occur. Like murder cannot occur. Okay, that one's out.
You'd almost need it though to have before. So, say someone who conceived of something you've never conceived of before comes into your universe, that you are presented with the options: can this occur? Can this not occur?
I don't know what that means. Like, if you're defining all of the possible physical interactions in their universe, and you're saying someone comes up with a new kind of physical interaction.
Well, say no one had ever thought of murder before, and then someone comes into your world and goes, "Oh, I want to murder someone. I want to stab them and kill them before their time is met." And you're like, "Well, I've never heard of someone killing someone before their time is met." Then that becomes a new concept that you have to disallow or allow.
Sure. So in that case, you would say that they had limited their knowledge, so they don't know everything. And if they limit their knowledge and try to make rules based off of their limited knowledge, there are some things they haven't recognized yet, and those would probably be like default on the allowed list, I guess, maybe. Or they could set it, if there's something I don't know, it's default on the disallowed list or default on the allowed list. So you could set that too. But the problem here would be is the first thing they'd have to do is like limit their knowledge before they started to create the universe.
Oh, so they'd have omniscient knowledge in their own universe.
Yep, you'd probably start with that.
Presumption before they did any other rules.
Okay. Yeah, you would start with that. That would be a default setting.
What kind of human would agree with limited knowledge?
All of them? Like most people would probably like be willing to play video games. It's like I'm going to play Luke Skywalker, which means I'm going to limit my knowledge to the knowledge of Luke Skywalker in the movie. I don't know of anyone who would not do that.
Yeah, but that's kind of a fetish more than a actual will.
What? Fetishes are also wills? I don't understand the question.
Well, I guess so, yeah. I'm sorry.
As long as the video character can't jump out of his game and fucking murder me.
That's up to you. You have that option. You could make it so that the ring wraiths can literally come out of the video and stab you.
Oh, I meant just from my lack of knowledge. video game characters, from my knowledge, can't do that. But they could, in reality, do that because I limited my knowledge to say that I didn't know that they could do that, but they can actually do that.
Yeah, you could set up your universe any way you want. You could make it literally the same laws as this Earth with all the rape and murder and death and stuff if you wanted. And you have joint universes, so like you and somebody else in their universe, like we want to make a universe together with joint rules and laws and stuff. You do that, you just randomize it, random universe generator buttons.
I think this is the mentality of an omniscient God, isn't it?
What?
This is the mentality of
Are you calling me an omniscient God? What?
yeah, sometimes in my dreams. But the ability to create your own universe and to choose the rules of the universe is an ability of not a human, for sure.
Well, humans can do that. Well, presumably, like when we make the Matrix, we'll be able to do that. We make computers big enough to simulate universes, we'll be able to do that.
Yeah, but a simulated universe will not be a universe.
Sure it will. Like we can literally create everything in the physics of the universe. I mean, presumably we'll be able to gain enough control over physics to create universes like the Big Bang. That's a possibility too. Like there's no logical contradiction there.
You won't be able to tell the difference. When you're in it, you won't be able to tell the difference. You won't know any better.
That's the criteria. So you wouldn't be able to tell the difference from a real universe and a constructed universe?
You could or you could not. It wouldn't make a difference either way, whichever one you want.
So it's all for all.
Don't know what that means.
Free for all?
Me neither. Free for all, yeah.
Free for all, yes. It's mostly a free for all. So in the best of all possible worlds, everybody gets their own universe and you can design it however you want.
If we have the technology that we need.
Yes, we would presumably have to make the technology to make the best of all possible worlds. We're not there now.
How long do you think it's gonna take?
I'd say within the next few thousand years, probably. Once we get artificial intelligence, it's going to go pretty quickly.
Few thousand years. I mean, we've been the last 200 years has been amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, the last 200 years we got from barely being able to fly to getting to the moon.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
I mean, it's basically exponential.
Yep. But to get to the best of all possible worlds, where everyone gets their own universe, we got a ways to go.
What do you think about the agenda? What is now 31? The world government thing. Do you think that that's a feasible thing?
I don't know what it is.
It's when all the nations are gathering under one government.
Yeah, not likely.
No, America's weird.
Of course, America is something else.
Like once we get artificial intelligence and they run everything, then it's possible.
Yeah, I've watched the anime series Evangelion. Then they have 3 computers to run the world. 3 artificial intelligence stuff to tell them what to do.
Isn't that only Japan? Is that...
Peter Pan?
I think it's only Japan has the 3 AIs.
Japan has 3 AIs already?
No, in
the anime, the only people who have the 3 AIs are the people in Japan in the anime.
Yeah,
of course
3 AIs from Japan.
Yes, Baltazar, Melchior, and the other one. But it's made by Japan, so all the angels are attacking Japan, like all the aliens are attacking America in all the movies.
Yes. Well, they attack Japan in the Japanese movies. They attack America in the American movies.
Yep, that's what he was saying.
Yeah. Have you seen the news that we are close to an over the speed of light engine?
No, not even no.
It's theoretical, and it's called a Helica engine, I think.
We are nowhere near that.
And
We are not going to come anywhere close to the speed of light anytime soon.
well, don't say never. Never say never.
I didn't say never. I said anytime soon.
I think it manipulates mass or something like that, like this. Sorry.
No, you're right. My understanding was you couldn't do it without the space-time bubble, so you had to disconnect yourself from space-time, and there's no way to connect yourself back to space-time from that. But
Well, I mean, you can go faster than light if you use dark energy and essentially just make the space in front of you go to the space behind you. Then you can travel faster than the speed of light. Because dark energy does that. The universe is doing that on its own.
Yeah.
well, it's expanding the space itself faster than the speed of light, but that doesn't mean anything traveling through that space is traveling faster than the speed of light.
Right. So if you have a localized part of the space behind you that's like thicker and a localized part in front of you that's like thinner, it's kind of like a wave and you're riding the wave, then you can move, since space doesn't have a speed limit, you can move at potentially any speed. Since you're not moving, the space around you is moving. So if you can move the space in front of you to the space behind you and you're moving the space, then there's no speed limit. You can be moving at whatever speed you want.
But you said you can disconnect from space-time. What does that mean? How can you disconnect from space-time?
I didn't say that. I have no idea.
No, I said about that. I don't know what the tech's called. It's they basically form a. I'd have to look it up again. Sorry, my cat's sitting on my lap. Give me a sec.
TJump, how do you know something good from something bad? For example, how do you know that killing is not and stealing is not? And we know that charity is something.
Well, so I know something is good if it mirrors onto what we think morality is. So, like, we make a list of moral actions and a list of immoral actions, and we try to find a pattern, and we just plot that pattern out on like a number line to figure out which ones are the good ones and which ones are the bad ones.
But if you think that we are a human being, well, for example, you are selling PlayStation 5, for example. But that will not hurt you because after that just you will play games, play Dark Souls or God of War or something like that. And we know charity is good, but we are giving money, and we are not doing something with money. For example, buying something, buying a pizza or sandwich or anything you want, and but we are giving it to another person.
So morality is a voluntary assistance of will. So if you give somebody money, that's moral. If they want money, and if they want a pizza, it's moral to give them a pizza. Whether or not you do the most moral thing doesn't matter. As long as if it's moral, it's moral. It doesn't matter if it's the most moral thing. Stealing somebody's PlayStation 4 is a involuntary imposition of the will of the person who owns the PlayStation 5. So that would be immoral because it's an involuntary imposition of will.
So let me search about some.
So what?
So like if that's what morality is, if a voluntary assistance of will, and someone wants to buy like cocaine and then you give
Perfectly
them
moral.
cocaine.
Perfectly moral.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
I guess so.
As long as they're consenting adults, yes, perfectly moral.
Would assisted suicide also be moral?
What?
Assisted suicide, because that's a
Oh,
voluntary...
definitely, it's moral.
Yes.
Dave Warnock.
Yeah,
There is a big stigma on suicide, on assisted suicide. Yeah, some people want to die.
Many people.
Well, I didn't want to yeah.
Yeah, it is definitely the case that there are many people whose lives are miserable and are going to continue to be miserable, and whether or not they should choose to live them is up to them, and it's a decision they should make, and putting them out of their misery if they want that is a moral assistance of their will.
Yes, exactly. Would you say that the biggest contribution of Christianity is the idea of guilt?
No. Guilt is biological. It came way before Christianity.
Is it though?
Yes.
I mean, in polytheistic societies, you can redeem yourself from some reasons.
Well, like dogs feel guilt. Like if they take something they know they weren't supposed to take and you say bad dog, they feel guilt about those kinds of things. Like guilt is just an emotion in the brain that's pretty common among social animals.
You don't even have to say bad dog for them to feel guilt. So if they do something bad and they know it's something bad, without like, even if you don't know yet they done something bad, they like you sometimes can read the dog and see, did you do something bad? And then you go around the house and see what they did.
Yep.
Yes, but isn't this in domesticated, quasi-domesticated animals like dogs? And because we prime the dogs to feel guilt, I think.
Well, we didn't prime their brain to feel guilt.
Them.
What we do is we train their brain to feel guilt in certain cases, but the guilt is just a product of the brain. Yeah. Like we can't like make a new emotion happen in the brain. It's still just the brain doing the brain emotions. We can just cause them to trigger under certain circumstances.
That doesn't even matter though. Well, it's like even if we humans trained them to feel guilt, they're capable of guilt. That's the only thing that's important here.
Yeah, I guess so, but there is a limited amount of animals that we consider them to feel guilt. I mean, do we see guilt in wild in the wild?
We see fairness in the wild. That's
fairness.
In the monkeys, show like if you give them something and they see their friend get something, or if the friend gets punished because they get something better, they see fairness. Like if you give some monkey something that should be good for them, they feel guilt if they get that.
Probably we see that in our related ancestry in chimps, in apes in general, but I don't think we can see guilt in killer whales or I don't know, lionesses.
Rats are capable of feeling regret about their own actions.
Yeah, but they're mammals.
So are everything you listed. Lions are mammals too.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Are whales mammals? I don't know.
I think so.
Yeah.
At what point do you expect to see it that we don't see it? Do you expect a tree to show guilt?
Republicans.
Yeah, Republicans
No, I
feel
don't
guilt.
expect.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and bugs.
Genetic
I don't presume. I don't presume a fly feels guilt.
Yeah, I think so. Not in insects, not in birds.
I wouldn't
Actually,
gen-
birds like some birds are super smart, like crows. So crows could probably
Yes.
feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, but smarter is not guilt.
I would be.
I would bet. I'm not sure, but I would bet that some birds can feel guilt.
Yeah, definitely. I expect there to be claw. I don't know if there's been tests on that. But I mean, there's a lot of different emotions that you could test animals for that we haven't got around to testing animals for. So it's a really big ask.
Well, I think we can do this with the Skinner box. I mean, in the similar ways that the Skinner box worked for superstitions and stuff like that. But I don't think you can make a pigeon to feel guilt for something. It can be.
Pigeons are pretty dumb.
Yeah.
You can teach pigeons superstitions, and they're stupid as fuck.
Yeah, but
that sort of says a lot.
Is there a difference between guilt and shame, or the really fucking hell, the realization of doing something wrong, something that is not? What's the semantics in this? I mean, guilt. We know what's guilt because it applies to humans, but how can we apply this concept to other beings?
Well, yeah, like dogs realize they've done something wrong when they've like done something that you've punished them in the past for, and so they recognize they've done something which is wrong, which is both. I mean, 'cause there's a difference between guilt and remorse. Guilt is knowing you've done something wrong, and remorse is like wishing you could have undone it.
Oh, okay, that changes things. But wish it you could have done it, that presumes a type of consciousness that can foresee the future.
Yes.
I mean, wish it that you could have undone it. It means you have visualized the options that you had after you done it. But I don't think dogs can do that.
Haven't you done that with animals though, where you see them look like they're doing something, like a cat looks like they're going to push something off, and you give them an evil look? They go, "Ooh, shit! I know what's going to happen in the future. I'm going to regret what I'm going to do if I do that. So I better not do that."
I mean, regret and guilt are technically synonyms, so they can be used interchangeably. I think my definition is slightly different, but
I think that occurs with a lot of those sort of. Yeah, no, you're right. But you do see that, I think, in other animals. Like, you can see them doing the same emergent phenomenon.
yeah, like pretty much all human emotions can be seen precursors of in other animals. Not like humans have access to one emotion that nothing else does. It's just different combinations of the primary ones.
No, I agree with that. Yes, but I strongly believe that Christianity has accentuated this problem in human life, because that's what Christianity is based off. It's based off guilt and how to make you get better.
I guess that's true, because yeah, the idea that every human has sinned and they're like obligated to do things that like just thinking about things is a sin. That's definitely more Christian than most religions.
What do you think about the Calvinistic view of Christianity?
Well, there's a bunch
I think
of
it's a
different.
horror show.
Well, there's a bunch of different views of Calvinism. The most popular one is the no free will Calvinism, which is hilarious.
Yeah. By the way, how do
God
you reply?
ordained that you're going to hell, and it's God's fault,
Yeah.
but too bad.
Did they freely choose that they were Calvinists?
No, Calvinism is that there's like the prominent views of Calvinism is there's no free will. God just
No, I
decides
know,
everything.
Making fun of them. They didn't even get to choose that they were Calvinists.
How do you TJump reply to this thing that God has the dominion. God is the master, and we have to obey it.
That's slavery.
Yeah, but he is the creator of the universe, so
still slavery, still immoral.
It doesn't matter.
It does if he's evil, because if he's evil, that means it's a contradiction. He can't be all good. So if he's immoral by causing us to be slaves, then that violates the Bible.
The Bible. Do you think the Bible is complete?
It's a complete pile of dog poo.
Oh, Dr. Josh would be upset if he heard you say that. TJump, aren't you forgetting
Dr.
God's
Josh would say it's only
permissive
half a
will?
Paladopter group.
What about the permissive will and the remissive will and the other will? The Calvinists like break it down into like wills into piles of different sectors of bullshit.
Someone asked if the Bible is complete. I don't understand that question because it depends how you view it. Like there are books that aren't included in the canon.
Well, I mean, because there's like the Muslims say this is the final revelation from God, like that completed. And there could be like another one, Jesus 3, the return of Jesus, the third.
Well, technically, Jesus is meant to come back and throw people into the fires. So,
yeah,
according to Jehovah's Witnesses, he
someone could
already
write
come
that
back.
book.
Yep.
Mormons.
Yeah, Jesus did come back.
Yeah, he threw
According
the
to
three people he was
Jehovah-
meant to throw into hell, and we're all good. We're set.
Jehovah's Witnesses think that Christ come back in 1914, and he had a major war in heaven, and he cast the devil on earth, and that's why all the things doesn't work today, because the devil is among us. So he did come back.
Devil did nothing wrong.
What? Nothing wrong.
Yeah.
He did nothing wrong.
Like all he did was he wanted to be God. Like that's not even a sin. There's nothing wrong with that.
Devil. The devil wanted to be God.
Well, he didn't lie or anything. He was honest.
Yep.
Isn't that the story of every single human on this earth since forever?
No, a lot of them died in childbirth.
Okay.
And
no, but the thing that humans want to be God.
No, a lot of them do. But like, I want to have control over my own universe, but I don't want to be God because I don't want control over other people.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Do you want to be like God, or do you want to be the God? Do you want to be in control or in control? What?
Most people want control, but not everyone. Like some people like to be dominated, sadists, masochists, whatever. But I don't think most people would want to be God, an all-powerful being. I think they'd want to be powerful, but not all-powerful.
I don't think most people could comprehend being God, wanting to be God. Like it wouldn't even make sense to want to be that thing.
I'll be back in a minute.
Is omni things even possible? Even
Not
logically.
simultaneously.
No,
Exactly. Exactly.
there's Gideon problems. I don't know what they are. You know, the math problems that are like unsolvable. So you couldn't be omniscient because you can't solve problems that are unsolvable.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It's fascinating people believe it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yes, but I don't think they really believe it. I think they want to believe it. They want to believe it. What's the power of beliefs in today's world?
Probably the same thing everybody said about Platonic ideals, is they served as a useful aiming point, but you still needed practical applications.
Once you show
Exactly.
they're no longer practical, we can move
Yeah,
on.
and then you can, once it's no longer practical, you just move on or find a better one. We can do better than God now.
So beliefs are progressive, are moving from one spot to another.
It's like a
beliefs
target, a
are
bullseye,
growing.
something to aim for. When you hit the bullseye, you move on to a new target.
Even in religion, they're progressive. Like, you know, you don't have the Christians quite as bad as they were. You know, yeah.
Well, that's because they have reformed. They have rethink their beliefs. Therefore, they've upgraded to the.
Exactly, they progressed.
Or they have stopped plagiarizing the humanism that our ancient ancestors figured out when they realized that strong families and tribes was the key to their survival. And so they're just getting back to the way we were with all the religious baggage.
I don't know. I'd call it plagiarism. Like plagiarism assumes there's a preset definition, which
Not really. It just means you're borrowing something that's not yours.
but it was no one's, so they're stealing from no one. They're stealing
Well,
from.
no, I mean we have the ethos of
cultural.
reciprocity as in like example form of how to run a tribes and families and unity and community.
Yeah, monkeys have that too.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not as
That's
though
true.
religions have invented that. It's something that almost seems part of our genetic makeup. That
Yeah,
a strong
it's
social group
ubiquitous.
is to our advantage.
Yeah, it's ubiquitous amongst social groups.
Social group in general, or in apes.
And hey, who knows? Maybe there is some sort of universal force out there that energy just coalesces into matter, and matter continues to process into higher, more complex forms of emergent molecules, and eventually that stuff becomes self-actualized, and it's just the law of the universe.
Are you telling me we're the most efficient form of entropy?
Thus far.
Yeah. Entropy boys. I've never heard anyone else actually refer to that, but yeah, I actually agree with that.
Well, it's
TJump,
how life on the planet works, right? We're bathed constantly in energy from the sun, so as an open system, we're going to have more and more and more levels of emergent complexity because there's constant energy being added to the system.
Correct. I can't argue with that.
I don't know,
You
but
better not. It's fucking
that's
physics.
simply.
But I know some flat earthers who would disagree.
That makes me feel good because I judge myself on the quality of my enemies.
Ooh, do you have many enemies?
Not
Hey, flat
anymore.
earthers are your enemies?
But I do need new shovels.
Sorry, TJ.
So,
Go on.
why do you believe this universe is without a cause, with his beauty, and we see that this universe is powerful and beautiful, and he has many. How do you believe and it is without a creature?
Could you repeat that, please?
Why do you believe that the universe has creature? We see that the universe it is beautiful and powerful and large, and it can't be without a creature.
Creator, like because it's beautiful and powerful and large. Like, yeah, I can.
How
It
do you
doesn't.
define beauty? Because I've always understood that our greatest attraction to things was like a mathematical appreciation of ratio and signs of good health and that sort of thing. Like, how do you define
Yeah.
beauty?
Proportions.
We don't need complex thing, just beautiful. Something is beautiful, yeah. Beautiful, simple, and beautiful and large.
Yeah,
Let's
Large.
let's
That's
take
we
an
can't
example.
predict it.
For example,
It's
there
really
is a
large.
printer, an old printer with blocks, and this blocks have letters, and in the ground there's a paper, and in this area has a earthquake happen, so the blocks will fall in the ground. So they will have a sentence and complete sentence in the ground on the paper.
I must say you've lost me.
Well,
You
if they're
understand
big
or no?
sentences, they're very large. Large sentences, that's the key. It'd be large. But I'm falling asleep. I gotta go take a nap. I'll see you guys later.
Keep well, bro.
Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Take care.
Bye. Love you.
Love you.